Apologies for the slight delay. You know what would actually help when you start streaming is if you put your stream to public so that everyone can see it. Oh my god. It's been one of those weeks, huh? It's one of those weeks. We're gonna get started here in just a second, but just bear with me. All right, let me lower the music just a little bit. And then let's make sure that we're all good to go here. All right. Let's do this thing. Hello, McVal. Good to see you here. Yeah, this week has been interesting when it comes to live streaming because the Wednesday one completely just fucked up with just like bad internet issues and all that kind of stuff. It seems like we had some internet issues yesterday still, but hopefully, and I probably just jinxed it by saying this, but hopefully we should be okay today. Hello, Erkanu. Good to see you. Welcome to the chat. Happy to have you here. In the meantime, what has been happening? I mean, we spoke to each other on Wednesday, right? So not that much has been happening. Yesterday I had a lovely evening puzzling. Well, not puzzling, like playing a board game with my mom because she came over. So that's nice. And then she also brought me a gift. So I got like a new Lego set, which you cannot see because it's out of view. But I've got like a Japanese maple tree. Like a little cute maple tree from Lego, which is awesome. Yeah, so that's been happening. Had a good fun. We played Wyrmspan, which is like Wingspan, but then with dragons, which was pretty interesting. It was our first game playing it. We had a lot of fun. It was cool. And then after that, I just spent the evening, honestly, just assembling the Lego stuff. Because this week has been pretty busy and I have a lot of stuff to do in the afternoon and over the weekend. So yeah, I'm kind of preparing for that. So yesterday I decided to take it a little bit more chill. So what is on the menu in terms of to do? I need to edit 5 workshops and get them online over the weekend. So that is on my to-do list. That's a big priority. I need to take care of some admin stuff, which is too boring to even mention. But yeah, the workshops are a big priority. I also want to do some more work on the academy stuff. And then also tonight I have a meeting with one of the team challenge teams as well, which is good. Yeah, so that's going to be on my to-do list. So it's basically trying to catch up with the workshop backlog here, which should be good. So what are the workshops again? Let me have a quick look. I had like a note here somewhere. Yeah, so the one from Tomer talking about portfolio reviews. That is gonna be the first one that I'm gonna be working on. Then we have Jerice. Jerice, who spoke about African cultures and how to integrate that within your games. Then we got Tanguy, who spoke about like PCG, which was really cool, a really cool workshop. And then we had Justin Fries talking about high poly modeling inside of plasticity. And then last but not least, we have the one from the one that we just had. God, it's been chaos. The one that we just had with Max Kutsinsko, texture artist from Ubisoft Barcelona, about splines and substance designers. So that's going to be good. So trying to get them all edited, up and running for all of you is going to be the main priority in the afternoon. So keep an eye out for that. Well, I say afternoon, but potentially, depending on the complexity, tomorrow as well. We'll see. We'll see. McFell is saying, nice, botanical Legos are cool. Yeah, I'll show you actually. So we've got like the two ones in the back. So we got the Japanese maple tree, and then we got like the, I guess the bamboo, right? They're quite cute. I like it. I like it a lot. Completely screwed up my camera setup, but hey. Nacho also decided to run away. But yeah, they're cool. They're cool. Had a lot of fun assembling them. It feels like I went back to my childhood, you know? The Japanese castle Lego set would work well with that one. Yeah, I'm not gonna spend a whole bunch of money on Lego. Some of the prices are crazy, man. They're like, oh god. I don't even want to look at them. They are cool, but they are also so expensive. Yeah, and especially if we're talking about like, if you mention Japanese castle Lego set, I'm already like, oh my god, what the hell? That sounds expensive, you know? But they are cool though. I've been looking around for some more secondhand like stuff that I can buy, like maybe some cool art books or maybe some cool statues that like I don't know someone wants to get rid of or something. So yeah, I've been kind of keeping an eye out on some of the secondhand websites for things. Depot L is coming into the chat. Hello, welcome. Lego prices are always crazy. Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I grew up with them as a kid, you know? I had the stereotypical, like, just large tub of Legos, which was awesome. I never realized how expensive they were and are now still, you know? So, yeah, it is crazy. Right, I'm gonna do a shout out again. So for people that are new to the stream, feel free to ask any questions about environment art, about making games, about any of that cool stuff. Because for context, I'm an environment artist in the video games industry. I've been working in AAA for like the last 10 years for multiple different companies. So yeah, if you want to ask me any questions, that is literally the goal of the stream, to help you get along in your artistic journey. So yeah. Does that Jedi helmet fit on a person? That is actually a Fallout helmet. And it does fit on a person, yep. I would not recommend it because they have been reclaimed or like recouped by like the American government from having like major health issues. So I probably wouldn't recommend putting it on your face, honestly, because yeah, it has a tendency to have mold inside of it that is super poisonous. So yeah, I'm not going to put it on. Big Fella saying, if I had the money and the space, I would get the Rivendell set, but it's like $600 plus. God, $600 plus. The way, maybe I'm so out of touch, right? And it's just like, when I hear that number and I'm like, okay, do I have to pick between like the Lego Rivendell set or like a second-hand car? It seems like one has a lot more value than the other, you know? Or like a lot of use. That's usually the way that I think about stuff. Sure, it's going to be a crappy second-hand car, you know? You can still find a car for that somewhere, you know? But to be honest, I don't even drive a car, so I guess the car for me doesn't really matter that much. But that is just crazy to spend like $600 on like, yeah, a piece of plastic. You can, okay. Here's a good thing. Let's make it more applicable to what we do, right? You can get a second-hand refurbished Herman Miller chair for that price. And that thing is going to last you 12 years or more of actually sitting on it, and it's going to really help with your posture, you know? So if you're looking for my recommendation, that would probably be the better way to spend it on. But God, yeah. Yeah, it's just, God, I'm so picky. Yeah, $600 sounds so much. Very on brand for Fallout. Oh yeah. Well, it is kind of on brand, right? Because that helmet is supposed to stop you from getting sick, you know, from radiation and all that kind of stuff. But they just flipped the script and they were like, hey, what if we actually just make a helmet that like poisons you, you know? Wouldn't that be cool? So crazy. That whole debacle with like Fallout 76 and the way that they completely botched up like that collector's edition. Oh my God. That is like a whole saga that will like live in people's memories for a long time. Because in short, and there's like a ton of videos about this, I'm sure. So in short, you bought the collector's edition. You would get that in like a canvas bag, right? Or like in like a really nice quality bag. They then shipped like a really basic, just stupid quality bag to you. A lot of people started complaining about it. Then they decided like, hey, you're right. Okay, let's we'll ship you a new one, right? But you have to fill in your details on this form. And then people started filling in their details. Then someone realized that actually it was going to like a database that a lot of people just could openly just access. So a lot of people's personal information just got leaked on the internet when they filled in that form. And then to top it all off, a lot of people had to send back the helmet because it was fucking poisonous. It's fucking wild. Oh my God. It is a freaking crazy. Argano is saying, made that helmet for a test to get into his studio, a 3D model. Low and high, bacon texture, and got in. Hey, nice. Hey, that's awesome. Congratulations. Yeah, I think I've also modeled some Fallout stuff, but I modeled like a Mr. Handy, you know. That was pretty fun. And then I decided to redo it a couple of times as well to see if I got better in my skills. And it was it's not even public, right? But it was like this really nice project where I could just like go back and forth between something that I did before and just really test myself on like, hey, how do I model stuff now? Am I better at it? It's yeah, it was cool. Hello, Harry. Good to see you. We have our first question for today. Let me dive into that in just a second. I remember something about the bottles and a bag from the collector's edition as well. Yeah. So the bag was the thing that I was talking about, right? Where they were gonna ship you like a premium canvas bag or something like that. I don't think it was no canvas. But they basically just send you like a shitty plastic one. It was really bad. Because I ordered, this is from the collector's edition, right? Because I ordered the collector's edition. Which is probably the last time that I'm gonna support Bethesda with a freaking collector's edition like that. Ugh. But yeah. Yeah, there was something with the bottle as well. What was that again? I think, oh yeah, I remember now. With the bottle, it was supposed to have this like very iconic Fallout shape, and then they started producing it. But the shape was completely different or something like that, and it didn't even really look like the thing in game or something like that. It's like, just, dude, come on, just have some oversight. Have some oversight and like make sure that those things like actually are the thing that you want to have. It's Crazy. Depot is saying, I find it kind of ironic how in the Fallout TV show they were discussing all the crazy management thematics and how former Bethesda, there's all talk about how constant meetings got in the way of creativity. Yeah, and I think that's not out of the ordinary for a lot of bigger companies, you know? You get to a scale where it's really difficult to not have a lot of meetings, right? Because there so much is about like how do you properly communicate down the chain, right? Or like through like all the different departments, and every department can be like tens, 20s, like multiple tens of people, like big, right? In some cases, on some productions, it's multiple hundreds of people. It's kind of crazy. I mean, that's why production is like a whole thing, right? And production grew out of that constraint, right? Where at a certain point, like small development teams that grew up, they just realized like, hey, look, I'm spending too much of my time talking and communicating and trying to get stuff done, so I need like a dedicated person for this. And that's where the producer comes from, right? But yeah, it is crazy. Like, you definitely need some meetings, or you definitely need some meetings like in the chain somewhere, and everyone needs to be sort of informed. But the way that you do that and how much you do of that, like that's been up for debates, right? Hold on, let me just sign out here. I don't want to have like pings all the time. Cool. So first question from Viranchi P. Let's see. I'm currently enrolled in a game art course and I want to specialize in hard service and props for games, but I barely see any listings for those roles. Usually it's environment artists, if any. That might be because you are looking for bigger companies. Usually hard surface and props and all that kind of stuff, they get done by outsourcing companies or co-development companies now. So that is less of an actual position within AAA companies. You are probably just looking in the wrong place. You should be looking for art outsourcing houses or co-development companies. For example, you're probably going to find a lot of those positions under like Keyword Studios, right? Or any other outsourcing studio that you might find. So that's where I would be looking. Depot L is saying it's rare to see pure modeler roles. Animators or riggers, lighting artists, and environment artists are in higher demand, it seems. Yeah, for the same reasons, right? Like a lot of that stuff went to outsource. And then environment artists are usually in higher demand because you need a lot of them on a production, right? I'll try to break it down for you all, right? So if you work for a AAA company, you only need to have a modeler on the team or modelers on the team for the really important stuff on the game, right? So that means that if you have like assets that are really important to the narrative of your game or are like really complex that you have to build them in-house, those are the things that you're going to get done by an in-house modeler, right? Anything else that you see in the game, from potentially buildings to any generic assets, anything like that is all going to get outsourced to other countries, usually in cheaper regions. But yeah, this is interesting. I don't really know what the outsourcing landscape looks like right now, because it has changed a lot over like a couple of years. For example, Sumo Digital, who used to do like a lot of their own games, or was trying to for the longest time, has now also turned into like more of an outsourcing co-dev house as well. So yeah, a lot of companies are switching all the time as well. But yeah, in short, if you are looking for a job as like, let's say, a prop artist or a hard surface modeler, you're most likely going to find it in outsourcing or co-dev. McFall only got one collector's edition ever, and that was Cyberpunk. That is probably a good choice. I don't know what was in it, but yeah, that sounds like a great choice. Hello, Skapolov. Good to see you back. Hope you're doing well. Furkissimo is saying, I'm working in XR, experience industry as R&D, and I have architecture background. I function similar to tech art in here. How can I switch to the games industry? Okay. Tech art is a broad thing in the games industry, right? In general, where I would probably go is I would learn Python, pick up Python, build tools that are going to build a bridge between artists and programmers. That's what I would look for. So, like, I don't know. For example, let's say I'm using, let's say in my workflow that I have currently, I put an asset into the game, right? And then I don't use RGB mask because I don't wanna bake them down in Substance Painter, right? So what I do instead is I go into Unreal and I do my bake into Unreal, but that means that I have to click on the button and I have to do the bake and all that kind of stuff. Find a way to automate that, and that is already like a really good tool, right? If you can find out a way to like automatically do that bake in Substance Painter as well, because then you might have like more control and all that kind of stuff, that would also be cool. But generally looking for things that will smoothen the artist experience with building the worlds, that could be more interesting. Let me give you a couple generic examples, right? Tools that speed up asset placement is always going to be good, because we do, and this is going to sound silly, but we do spend a lot of our times just like dropping an asset into the world, making sure that it's aligned with the terrain underneath it and all that kind of stuff, right? If you can build tools for any of that, that can be a good one. But yeah, basically in general, what you want to do is look at the current workflows and see where you can build tools that are going to ease the pipeline for artists specifically. So you are probably going to have to talk to a lot of artists and ask around, see what's the most common issue, right? Like, let's say ask like 20 environment artists that you can find or that you know, if they're working in Unreal, let's say, and then just ask them, what is your biggest issue with Unreal? And then see how you can help. Because yeah, that's what it's all about, you know? Like, you need to know about the workflow and how you can build tools against it. It's really difficult to come up with a tool if you don't know what the problem is in the pipeline. So that's where I would start. So again, for people that are just jumping in, we're just warming up. We're just warming up a little bit. So if you have any questions, any things that you want to bring up, or I don't know, maybe you have some interesting things to talk about, feel free to drop it in the chat. Because we are going to be jumping into some portfolio reviews in just a minute. So we will have a look at it. But yeah, otherwise everything is going good. Sun is shining. I like it. Maybe what we should do, let's jump into one portfolio review already, so that we can get that out of the way. Then we can see. All right, we got a question here. So Dpot L is saying, do you have any experience with selling on Fab or similar platforms? I recently uploaded my first pack for sale on there. Yep, I have experience. It's outdated experience for sure, because when I was selling my asset packages, it was still called Unreal Engine Marketplace, right? And I think I started selling stuff in like 2021 or something like that, maybe even earlier, 2020. But yeah, I think it still remains like a good option for people that want to have some like interesting side income coming in. which could be really, really cool. It can be really valuable. It does demand a whole bunch of your time, right? Because the benefit of doing it is basically you are selling. You start with one pack and then you build up to a second pack and you build up trust with a bunch of people, right? And at a certain point, the real benefit, if you wanted to do this if you wanted to take it really seriously, that is where the main benefit is going to come from, right? That at a certain point, your name is attached to it in a way that signals trust to people that are going to be buying stuff, right? For example, Decagon is a great example, right? Completely out of scale, right? They work at like a different scale than the individual at this point, but it is a good indication of if you want to reap the benefits, that is sort of where you want to work towards over the long term, right? And it can be done. However, if you just want to sell like the occasional thing, let's say in my experience, what I did is I was relatively purposeful with I want to build portfolio work, but then I also want to sell it, right? So that was my combination of the two. So that meant that whatever I was doing in my personal work had to have some sense of modularity in it, because that is where the flexibility comes in, that you can then hand that off to a user and they can build their own stuff with it, right? Because that is what you want to do whenever you're selling anything on Fab or a similar marketplace. It's not about what you do, it's what you can deliver to your client in that case, right? So keep that in mind. Because, for example, you could make a beautiful portfolio piece and then sell it on Fab, but it might not sell because it has no value to like the people buying it, right? So try to keep that in mind. The combination of the two is really important there. That you're not only making pretty pictures, but you're making functional things for people to actually use in their own developments. And yeah, the opposite is also true, right? You can't only make really functional stuff that doesn't look pretty, right? Because then it's not going to sell. And that's the real advantage that we have as artists, is that we are good in making things look pretty, right? And we can make things sell visually well. So you can use that skill in combination with this marketing skill, with this building skill to sell some stuff. So yeah, I would definitely do it. I have shared. This is always the weird conversation. I have shared my income on stream before, so I can't remember which stream it was because I'm really bad at naming my streams as well, as you can tell. But yeah, I will say again that my first month of income actually made me more than my full-time job at that point. That is going to be completely different, right? So don't take that as a benchmark and then go in with that belief of that being true. But it can be a really good side income. And if you really want to make, let's say, modular kits or assets by yourself, and that is the thing that you want to do, I think it can be like a really good way forward. Specifically, if you then also explore what is going to happen with user-generated content in the future, or is happening at this point, right? Look at Roblox, look at Fortnite, see what those platforms are doing, because there might be something interesting there that you can build upon. Hello, Lily. I keep forgetting you stream on Fridays. Dang it, Lily. Come on. That also reminds me, we need to get better at like sending these notifications out, because dang it. What happened here? Okay, I see what happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that will probably also be one of the things that I'll be looking at, like how we can improve like notifications and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, thank you for the questions. Dpod L, that is awesome. Let me switch on over to the main screen and we're going to be looking into some portfolio reviews, shall we? All right. So we are on the portfolio review page, which anyone in our community can access. So you can just literally go to your overview page, you get access to all your cool stuff, and then you have your portfolio reviews over here. Again, we grade, or I grade your portfolios on your hireability, presentation, artistic skills, and your techniques, right? I'll break that down as we go into it, but here's like a quick overview of what you can expect from these 4 things. Let me just blow my nose. Give me just a sec. Sorry for that. I guess that's a downside of having like a wide angle lens. There's nowhere to hide. So first person for today. Yuano Chen with the goals of Bloober Team, Remedy, and Capcom. So that means, what did Bloober Team make? What was that game called? Chronos, right? I actually watched like a full playthrough of that game. That looked really interesting. And then Remedy is making Control, and then Capcom is making Resident Evil, right? I don't know what else they do, but yeah, sort of what I'm getting from that is like dark, potentially horror-based games, right? Or at least in Remedy's case, not necessarily horror, but like weird games. Yeah, I think Capcom does more, right? Like Monster Hunter, and they probably have like a bunch of other stuff too, because they're a big company. I'm honestly not that familiar with Capcom and what they do. It's just never been on my radar as like a gamer, honestly. Right, Mortal Kombat. Yeah. But that's the sort of thing that I'm getting from it, right? Like if I'm reading Bloober Team, Remedy, and Capcom, I'm assuming like dark horror kind of settings. That's what I'm imagining. So let's have a look. You are from Taiwan, from New Taipei City. Awesome. So 3D environment artist, that is cool. And then I love substance designer and horror games. Okay, cool. That is awesome. Let me have a look at your LinkedIn as well. So the reason why we do this is because I want to see how easy it is to reach out to you. And, you know, to like get in contact in your CV and all that kind of stuff. I want to make sure that like the links between your portfolio and your social media profile are pretty good. I'm not sure how you feel about this, but having a profile picture can help. There's sort of pros and cons to it, but I would rather see like someone's face because it makes it more memorable, right? So that might be something to think about. And let's see, contact info. You got your ArtStation here, which is good. You got your contact info there as well. Cool. I like it. And then all your recent posts have been stuff that you've been working on or someone else. Oh, interesting. Oh, interesting. So that's from 11 months ago? And that is not on your portfolio. Huh. Interesting. I wonder why that is. Sorry, we're diving into the deep end almost immediately. The 3D artist is Guillaume Laval. I have never understood how they credit people. Because... sorry, my bad. So stunning relighting work. Okay, so this is a relight from a pack that was built by someone else. Got it. Okay. Interesting. So that's why it's not on the portfolio then, because it doesn't hold too much weight in that opinion, right? Okay, cool. That's interesting. So let me have a look here. You have a blog from like 2 years ago, a making of, which is cool. We might dive into that later. And then you have your resume here as well, which we are just gonna open this up. So pretty straightforward. You've got your ArtStation, LinkedIn, and email. Good. Okay, interesting. So in here, this is small. This is small stuff, right? But this email address looks more professional than the one that you actually have on your LinkedIn, right? Because this feels personal. Replace that with a professional one so that all your communication goes to one inbox rather than it being chaotic for you, right? So that can be improved. Software, Blender, Maya, Substance Designer, Substance Painter, ZBrush, Unreal Engine, Marvelous Designer. That's good. I would also mention potentially how good you are in those things. Like, even if you give me a sample of like basic proficiency is this and that, and like what would it advanced proficiency or something like that, you know, like feel free to come up with your own names. But then I know that like you're really good at Blender, but you're maybe not as good in Maya, right? Something like that. And then your job experience is a 3D artist at K&K, which is a garment accessory company. Okay. Environment assembly in Unity, lighting optimization in baking Unity. Interesting. So you mentioned Unreal Engine here, but you're doing a lot of professional work in Unity, which might also be worth mentioning. Collaborate with a designer to create products for modeling, texturing, and the final render. Right. Okay. And then you have your skills. Interesting. So we go from software, job experience, skills, education. It feels like it's too chaotic. What I would probably do is, in this case, you probably want to put your job experience first, right? So you put your job experience first, then your software. Wait, maybe job experience, education, software, and skills. Skills and software, probably. The way that I'm thinking about it is in terms of importance to the person who's going to be reading your CV, right? Where I would probably want to know where you work and your professional experience first, because again, at this point, I usually already have a good idea of what you can do on a personal level, right? So hit me with that first, then showcase your education, because your education in this case is really relevant, which is good. And then have your skills and then the software that you use. That's what I would do. So rearrange all this to make it a bit nicer. If you want to improve some of this, like there's a lot that you can do with the design. Really simple designs. If you just Google like CV templates, there's a bunch of really good ones. Don't pick an overly complex one. Pick a simple one, but it often adds like, you know, separations between different sections. It really plays around with like the font size to like highlight certain areas compared to other areas, right? It's that kind of stuff. There's nothing really wrong with this, but it's more about like the presentation of the work. Okay, cool. Lily is saying, why do some people not have a LinkedIn profile picture? I'm not sure. Maybe it might also be like regional based, that for some people, like LinkedIn is not that big of a thing. I'm not sure actually. The only thing that I could say, and this is not really a you issue, right? This is not you as an individual person that needs to keep this into account, but the recommendation that people say is to not have your profile picture on your CV, because that might encourage some unconscious bias within the person hiring you in the recruitment cycle, which is, yeah, I mean, I can see it happening. It should obviously not be a thing, but I can also see that it does happen. So I don't know. I don't know what the right thing is there. I would probably not put it on your CV. I can agree to that. But on your social media platform, I would definitely want to have a bit more of a personal look into who you are, right? Same thing for your ArtStation. I can definitely see it being nice to just have like a profile picture there. Um, here's another tip. Here's another tip. If this is the way that I tend to think about like my social media profile, right? Is that if you have a profile image, keep it consistent between all your platforms, right? Because that creates consistency. So if I see your profile image, I don't know, in this space, and I see your profile image in this space, I know you're the same person, right? It sounds really dumb, but if you have a different image in every space, then it becomes really hard to put a link between those things, right? So try to be consistent with that too. And this is very much on a personal this is very much on the spectrum of what you want to do with your personal life, right? I am very upfront with my full name. So I always have my full name, even on my Discord, it's just my full name, right? Because that is who I am. I don't do the gamer tag thing anymore because, again, that creates consistency, right? Cool. But that's about the CVs and the resume. I think that was good. Let's dive into some work. Dpod L is asking, if someone has no job experience, should they not be mentioned at all in the CV, or a brief mention is better? Well, if you have no job experience, then you can't really mention anything, right? So, yeah, that is kind of a trick question, right? What I would do, let's say, even if you have no relevant experience, right? So, for example, my first CV going into games was talking about my experience of doing the dishes in a Chinese restaurant over the weekends. And then every year I would do a student job over the summer holidays working at like a chemical company, right? Those things were both on there. Not because they are relevant to that company that I was applying to, right? And this is when I was still studying, right? There is like company relevancy. There's also another thing that you do with those things, and it's showing that you're willing to work. That is oftentimes like the best thing that you can showcase, especially in the beginning. Because if I stumble upon your CV and most of your time has always been like doing like random odd jobs, that shows me that you have like the drive to and the willingness to work, right? So yeah, that is just to highlight that it doesn't only have to be relevant, but it can also just be irrelevant stuff to showcase that you are willing to work. Hello, B Hitia. Welcome. We are book is saying sometimes I don't even remember the name. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, this person, based on the profile picture or the work. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Because especially as visual creatures, right? Like the name, especially if you have like a common name, like people are not gonna remember that. But there's definitely been moments where I can recognize someone's face, you know, like 100%. All right, let's dive into the work here. Hello, just got home. Well, you're right on time because we're going to dive into the work. We already talked about your CV and your LinkedIn profile and all that kind of stuff. So now we're going to dive into the work. This one we've already kind of talked about, right? This is your latest piece. We might use that as like a point of reflection for some of the other stuff, but we're probably going to be skipping that for now because we looked at this during Whip Wednesday, right? And we might circle back around at the end. But let's have a look. You have a bunch of materials too. Interesting. Again, we're not going to be focusing on like the art quality, right? I need to remind myself to stop myself from doing that. So we're going to be focusing more on the presentation, right? Especially when you're doing something like this, make sure that you have something that breaks with the tile ability, because this doesn't present really well. Or even showcase like different variations, you know, like have different walls to showcase like different variations of it. Because even in this showcase, I can already see that tiling is a huge issue on this material, because it is very repetitive, right? But I do think that the way that you present things, as in, this is the context, right? This is the way that it would be presented in engine, like in an actual like working environment, is really good. So I do really like that. I'm curious how this is gonna work then. Yeah, there's a lot of same stuff happening here, right? Where sometimes it's better to just have like 2 or 3 images instead of just trying to show me like the same thing over and over again, because even this, like you're doing it with like night lighting, it's the same scenario, right? I don't think like turning it to night does anything different for me. So sometimes it's better to just come out with like one clean presentation that is not too many images, and then just do it that way. Yeah. In this case, honestly, for a material like this, if you're focusing purely on materials, I would expect to see like a full breakdown instead of like these little slivers that I can see. I want to see the whole map just laid out so that we can see like a full breakdown of it. That's cool. What I would do with materials like this, I would make it into. We did this fantastic workshop with Derek Elshoff, and I get this idea from him that it's really cool to make like a biome, right? So what I mean by that is not only make like one desert sand material, but make like a set of materials that can work consistently together, so that I can. Let's imagine that this is an actual work, like an actual professional development, right? And I need to make like the dunes for a game. I'm gonna be pretty restricted with this one material that I have, right? So think about the different materials that I need to make a full set of dunes, right? So that probably means that this can be nice for like the side that is going to be in the wind, but if you have like the slope going down, you don't want that many rimples and all that kind of stuff on it, right? So that means that we need to have one with these curves on it already, and then also another one that is going to be more clean, and then a transition between the two, right? And that is going to be more impactful than just showing like, hey, this is just a desert sand material, right? Show me that you can think about the production behind making a material, right? And that is also where it's powerful to have things in context, right? Because if you start building with this material and you start actually trying to make a small scene with it, you are going to run into those things yourself, because you're going to be vertex painting with different materials, and you're going to be like, too many stones here. Okay, I need to make like a variation that has less stones, right? And that gets you thinking. So think about the production behind this. And again, look at our workshop that we did for a while back with Derek Elshoff. He has like a bunch of good ideas on this. Right. See, this becomes more interesting already. I think you can take this way further than you did by actually changing the way that the material reacts to water. Or maybe there's denser patches of grass where grass is actually growing, right? This is a good base. I want to see you take this idea and take it to like 200%. That's what I want to see you do. Because water is going to discolor like the terrain surrounding it, right? Because it's going to make it more wet. So let's imagine that this So if I just grab my pen here, I'm going to do like a little bit of an overpaint. So imagine that this little section here is just like all muddy, right? And then you have a transition into the denser patches of grass, right? With actual grass growing on top of it, which is cool. Same here. I like those patches. And then what do we do with like these patches in between? Right? Like we need a different material here as well. So even in this scenario, just to make this sort of a scene work, we probably need at least 3 variations of the same material, or do something pretty interesting with our material setup inside of Unreal to kind of make it work out, right? So think about those things more when you are making a material, because making one material, really simple. I think a lot of people are doing the exact same thing, and that is introducing a lot of competition. So you thinking further than like 90% of the other people is going to get you the job, right? Because otherwise you land in the same bucket, and that's not where you want to be. So think about those things. And that can be applied to all of these materials, right? Like how are they going to be applied in an actual game scenario? And how do you then need to take that up to the next level? Again, there's some good indications here, right? This is cool stuff. The way that you actually think about the production of the environment and then all the things that you had to build to kind of function with that, really cool. I like it. But then you need to make all those components, just not one material. Right. Interesting, especially, I know that this is professional work, right? So this has like different parameters, but already having such a distinct sort of like pattern on your tiles is going to make it like instantly recognizable, right? Like these scratches specifically, you need to sort of like massage them into the material so that they don't stand out as much. Default L is saying if you go to Ambient CG or Polyhaven, you can see good examples of the same textures and materials having 3 to 5 variations. That's interesting. I didn't know about that. Obviously, like I can't really give too much feedback on this because it's professional work. So it's just totally different. Cool. Created all the assets except for the bust statue made from Quixel Mega Scans. Where is that? It's up top here. That's okay. That's totally fine. I had a quick peek before the portfolio review here, and I think this looks great. Right? Like these like short overviews like really make it pleasant to like scroll through the whole thing and actually see what you've been doing, right? So for example, this stuff, really cool, just like subtle little hints with vertex paint showcasing that you can set up the shader and all that kind of stuff. And how you used it. Yeah, stuff is really cool. A hero prop. Cool. This can probably be just like optimized and be presented like a little bit better. I'm not a fan of like a gray background. It's almost like you have such a beautiful scene and beautiful materials, right? Like I'm imagining that if you put the sundial on the floor, you remove like all the other materials and then you have just like a bespoke like rendering setup for that sundial. That is going to be like way more interesting to look at than just it on a gray background, you know? This is what I always advocate for, right? If you have made a beautiful scene, you can actually make your own like render setup using existing things in your scene already, but then just like cleaning it up, right? You can even retain some of these like modules in the back to kind of create like a wall at the far end, and then just play around with like depth of field, right? So that the focus is more on the actual sundial rather than the rest of it. Oh yeah, a couple of things that are missing here too. Poly count, UV texture size. Well, you got your UVs, but I want to see the texture size as well. And then this, I know why you're doing this. Sometimes, I don't know, like I thought this looked sexy at a certain point as well. But in terms of getting you the information that you need, this is just horrible because I cannot see like the AO of like this area or this area, right? So I think it's better to do maybe like a GIF, right? Where you go between your base color, your roughness, your normal, your AO, whatever you want to showcase, like in like a rotating quick succession, like GIF or something like that, right? Again, texture size would be handy to know. Fully authored in Substance Designer. Yeah, this one, this is an interesting one. I'm not a fan of this one whatsoever. This feels, apart from the ornamental details that you've probably taken like a bit of your time for, the texturing itself feels really, really rushed. And that's the feeling that I get like immediately, right? Here's the thing. In the scene itself, right? If we go to like the top scene, it works, right? Because it is applied in like a logical way. There's nowhere really that I can point out and be like, oh my god, that looks horrendous, right? But it is interesting then that if you show that in a breakdown, then I can really see. Forgive me for being brash, but like how low quality the texturing is on the stream sheet, right? Again, I can sort of in my head go like, yeah, but it does look good in the scene, so I can forgive you for that, right? Because it is functional to the scene, and I can almost guarantee you that sometimes materials in an actual production also just don't look great by themselves. I think the difference there is that usually you don't tend to show them often, right? So I guess this is more of a question of like, do you think this looks good? That is the main question that I'm probably posing here, right? Are you masking for wooden assets? Yes. That makes sense. Master shader with a trim sheet and RGB masking. Yeah. Pretty straightforward shader. Again, this is going to be my take, right? Like, this has always been my opinion. I'm not sure what I'm going to get out of this. I don't know. If it's like a very complex setup, right? That lets you do like really cool stuff. I want to see like the node setup and like you going through it interactively or something like that, right? That could be cool. But I don't really see the value in just showcasing like a material graph. But I know that also I have a specific opinion. Some other people have different opinions out there about material graphs on your portfolio. So make sure to also consult with other people about that. Plant Atlas was solely made in Substance Designer. Models were assembled in Maya. That is cool. Again, show me the texture sizes, right? Show me the texture sizes, poly count, all that kind of stuff on here as well, because this kind of feels, it's interesting. Like the longer that we go down, I feel less effort being put into the breakdown. Because this just feels like a couple of screenshots, yeah, quickly laid out in like Photoshop or whatever, and then just uploaded to your portfolio. Really think about like how you present yourself, right? Again, is it gonna be? It's not that this is like the thing where I look at it and I'm like, oh my god, he didn't present this well, so I'm just not gonna hire them. I don't think so. But in a group of people where you take extra care and like you showcase that you have an eye for detail and you have an attention to detail, that will make you stand out compared to other people, right? So again, like on baseline, you're good, but I don't think you want to be at baseline. You want to be better than that, right? But yeah, I think the scene itself is really cool though. We kind of skipped over it in the beginning. I really like the way that everything is combined. Maybe this is where the trim sheet is kind of showing its flaws, but then I do like the RGB masking that's going on with it. So this is kind of like on the furniture itself, it's kind of showcasing the limitations of that trim sheet. Some of the material work, glass is really difficult to get right. So that material work can definitely be improved. Yeah, this shot looks good though. I like it. What I would do is I would cluster things more together so that I have one space to be looking at rather than just like a bunch of like random stuff scattered in the scene, right? Because for example, what you can do is, let's say you have something really cool here going on, right? I would then put more of your attention here. And, you know, like, not kill it, but like, let's say you move everything closer in so that everything becomes more clustered around one area. And then you draw attention to it with your candles. That becomes like the main focal point here, right? And maybe get rid of like the light that's shining here because it's distracting a little bit. But that's just hinting at that composition, right? Where I want to see more of a focal point in some of these like additional shots, because main shot, beautifully done, right? I think you have a really nice layout and composition. There's certain things that I would balance, but like overall, you can kind of see that you added like a fake light here just to highlight this little area, which again, we can debate about like, oh, it needs to be physical, like, but I can see that you are trying to lead us here, which is good, right? Same thing here. I think this is nicely compact and dense. And then it just goes into like a couple of additional shots where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Are they as strong? Are they as strong? And I don't think so. Cool. And then the last thing here is obviously your latest addition to your portfolio, which is really cool. And this is what I mean, right? And this is why what I did in the beginning of this portfolio is I knew that we're going to be circling back to your most recent piece. Because let me have a quick look. When was this? Last year. Okay. The reason why I'm wondering is because I see a dramatic improvement between what you did last year and what we're seeing here on display already, which is really cool. Because again, you cluster things together. Your material work has improved as well. And the workflows that you use to highlight, you know, like a table, it's like beautiful, like unique details. And that it probably comes from realizing that you had a restriction with the trim sheet before, and if you wanted to go more high quality, you needed to do something like this, right? Which is a good choice. I really like it. Yep. See, this looks like a million times better, right? We talked about this during Whip Wednesday, so I'm not gonna go into it again. But this presentation, let's do a comparison, right? So if we compare this presentation to, let's say something like this, right? If let's say, where is it? Yeah. If we do like a straight up comparison, right? This looks way more interesting because you're still going with the thematic of your scene rather than this could be literally anything, right? So that's what I'm always advocating for. Like context of the scene always needs to be present, I think, because it adds to the feel even if this is just like a little breakdown that you want to showcase, right? It has a better impact, better visual impact. You could have potentially like done that here as well, right? Where you showcase, you still have like the floor underneath it, like very subtle, maybe, I don't know. Same for this, right? Because I think you're on the money. Like, this stuff looks really cool. This presentation, the way that you do that presentation, it's a shame that you didn't try to then incorporate that in here. Because, yeah, in a very subtle way, this could still be really, really effective. Because, yeah, this stuff looks really cool, right? It's just, it then gets broken up by some of this boring stuff in between. And I know that you asked for my perspective on that at a certain point, but yeah, that's something that I missed then. Yeah, this stuff is cool. 2x2 meters on a 2K map. This stuff is great, right? Showcasing how you build up like all those intricate layers that you've built up. This is cool. If I was to nitpick, the only thing that I would say is maybe the timing is a bit too long. But honestly, at that point, I'm nitpicking already, right? I think this is great. Yes, and your material work, like, again, massive improvements on your material work. I'm really breaking up that tileability. It's good. And then you just have like progress of the scene as well. Yeah. Really, really good. Like, honestly, like really solid work. If we're talking about presentation, there's a couple of things, right? Main thing that I brought up was the context of your breakdowns, especially with these ones, right? Again, the consistency throughout your artwork is something that is really cool. It just gets broken up by just having like black background all of a sudden. Yeah, these shots are really cool. And again, you have like 4 shots, right? I think maybe this one kind of feels a little bit optional, but it's still high quality to compare to your previous work, right? Yeah, this is stunning. Great stuff. I like it. Presentation is good. I love all this stuff. This breakdown is good as well. Oh, maybe the one thing. Let's talk about some presentation here, right? Yeah, I mean, you do have it here. The separation between all the different channels is really good. I like that. You have your UVs here. What I would advocate for is having your albedo in your UVs as well, so that I can see which area is which, right? Because now it's hard to imagine which area is which area on your asset, right? So this comes down to really thinking about, okay, you have to put yourself into the recruiter position, right? Where if they want to see a breakdown, what will they be looking for? Because here, I would probably be, well, first of all, I still want to see like the texturing, right? That's the baseline. And then draw a wireframe on top of it and then make it so that I can immediately see that this is like 2,112 tries, right? With a 2K texture on it. Because now it might feel like a little bit hidden. So maybe breaking things down or breaking things out where you can say, let's say, for example, you have like a little, maybe you move this a bit more to the right, and then maybe you have like a little thing here that says stats, which is absolutely unreadable with the stick brush. But let's say you have stats, and then you have like your poly count and your texture count in like a little section that I can immediately see what it is about, right? Again, it's tiny stuff, but again, it can help. Cool. All right, let's break this down. So if we go back, I think your hireability is really high, right? We did talk about your your presentation of who you are yourself, right? So this is like your LinkedIn profile is pretty bare bones. I would love to see like a profile picture, the CV, and your resume is basic, right? Not that that is necessarily a bad thing, but it is pretty basic. But again, just the initial impression of your work and the way that you present it consistently is really, really good. You have a good combination of asset work, right? So you have your asset in here. That is pretty good. And then you have your more environment art focused stuff with your two latest projects too. Yeah, so I think you present yourself really well. So hireability is pretty high. Presentation is pretty good. I would say, especially on the older work, there's a lot of improvements that can be made because it feels like there's a bit of bloat, and I want to see more context, right? Like the different materials for like making a consistent biome is really where you could score like a lot of points. So that is one thing where you could like increase it. Let me see. And maybe this is all posted last year. Oh no, it's not true. Okay, so this is interesting. So you're doing some self-curation in the work, right? Because this is all last. Most of these are from last year, apart from these bricks. Interesting. Because the bricks are the most interesting in terms of presentation and showcasing that you really thought about like, hey, multiple variations, the feasibility of using this generator, and then also the final presentation, right? Which makes me think that this needs to be here. That needs to be like the material that you go through. Because what is going to happen is that most people are just going to be like, okay, this is cool. This is nice. That's a cool professional work. And then we go into grass. This is not bad. But in terms of what you did with the bricks, this is lacking, right? Because this looks like a nice corner of an environment where the grass feels like a tileable. And that's the difference, right? So I would rather go into this than going into like the grass. The grass still has potential though. If you add like a couple of materials, like material variations, right, of the material that you've already made, there's a lot that can be gained there. But I would think about those things. So yeah, what else do we have here? So the thumbnails are captivating and clickable. I think that's 100% true across the board, right? I think you do a great job at presenting yourself. Very clean, very excited to see this. So that's awesome. Showcase only the most relevant and best artwork that you can create. I could probably make the argument that some of this, I would make improvements to it. I wouldn't necessarily remove them, but like definitely make improvements. And then the amount of images in your artwork is focused. I think that's where there's a lot of improvement to be made. So instead of like an 8 here, yeah, instead of an 8, that's where you're losing some points because some of your other artwork is kind of, there's a lot of, I mean, not a lot. There's a decent amount of images that feel like you don't really contribute meaningfully to the final art piece, right? So let me make some notes here. So the breakdowns can be improved further. Let me start out with something positive for once, please. Come on. So the portfolio itself is like amazing looking, right? So the design across the board, are really good. The breakdowns can be improved further. It's easy to miss information, and older posts don't have statistics, right? Cool. Let me see. Artistry. I think honestly your artistry is pretty good. I mean, I say pretty good. It's really solid, right? Especially in the latest piece. I love the way that you light. This has like a very grounded, like a lit kind of scene to it. Very, very moody. You know how to construct a mood. You know how to then craft like an environment that is kind of in line with that mood. I think you've done a fantastic job with this. So yeah, let's give you like an 8 on artistry, and then techniques. I know that I said that breakdowns can be improved further, right? But like your base level is already really, really good, right? It is now it becomes basically now it becomes difficult, right? Because you've improved all the easy stuff. And sure, there's more improvements to be made to like the material quality, right? But now it becomes fine-tuning, right? And that attention to detail, really looking at your references and then really trying to distill it and maybe add more like texture variation, you know? Because some of it still feels like with the RGB masking and the vertex painting feels a bit generic still. So how can you then take that even further than you do? But this is where it gets difficult, right? But yeah, you already have good techniques. So yeah, so you have an amazing looking portfolio. The design across the board and thumbnails are really good. Breakdowns can be improved further. It's easy to miss information, and older posts don't have statistics. Material. By adding context, right? So this is what we talked about before, like the context, basically talking about how production context. Let's talk about that, or let's mention it that production context, right? So this is making a set of materials instead of just one material. But yeah, it's looking good. Breakdowns here can be improved. We already talked about that. But the rest of it is really well presented. Again, the way that you light things to highlight separate things. The material presentation is pretty well done. I think I really love like the wood here. I think this generic wood as a base, I love how you're applying it into your workflow. I just don't think it looks good. It looks a bit too warped, a bit too distorted, and it kind of has like a very generated texture to it. This one over here looks awesome. Looks awesome. Yeah, paint for the ceiling. Cool stuff. Okay, cool. That's it. Awesome work. Keep up the great stuff, man. The great stuff. Doop. And thank you for sharing your portfolio. I really appreciate it. Yuancho is in the chat and is saying, I've been thinking about doing some small scene for those material posts. Would be cool. Yeah, I think if there was one thing, what would I recommend you to do, right? Because that is always like a question that we try to go back to. Yeah, it's almost like I want to see you take. Okay, this would be a challenge, right? It's like I almost want to see you take something like this, single screenshot. And how can you make this like the best possible thing? Right? How can you improve the material quality even further? How can you improve like the asset quality even further? And how can you like add like little decals to show like because you have some like really cool like interaction with the dirt, right? But how can you use that interaction within the material to highlight the story that you want to tell, right? Because you can, for example, tell a story of like scavengers coming in and then looking through the newspaper, right? But they didn't touch the rest of the table. So how do you then showcase that, right? And it's that sort of intricacy and attention to detail that is probably what I want to see if you are thinking about like building a single scene, right? Because that allows you to really focus on the material quality, really think about like how to make the chipped wood the best that it can be, and yeah, really go for it, right? Because I like what you're doing with these cutouts, but this stuff feels very just like, it's gonna sound rough, but like this has the feeling of like, hey, I'm just gonna do a quick sculpt with like a quick brush on top of it, right? It doesn't feel like broken up wood, right? It's that detail that is missing if you want to go for that. But again, I like the workflows that you use. They all make sense. The way that you produce this, the techniques that you're using, like parallax and occlusion mapping on the floor and all that kind of stuff. You're doing some really, really cool stuff. And I like the way that you're applying all the techniques that you learned to make like a consistent scene, right? And it looks really good, right? Take some of the lessons that we talked about in the Whip Wednesday further, right? For example, the lesson of like cause and effect, right? Showcasing that like, oh, the ceiling is broken, that means that there's going to be junk on the floor, right? And the better that connection can be between different things, the more interesting it's going to be, right? Same thing with the picture frame here. I think you really took those suggestions that I threw at you and you ran with them. And I think that's awesome, right? Now it becomes time to, okay, how do I take that lesson and like really integrate that from the beginning in the pipeline? But yeah. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I like it. Hello, Idris. Hello, Salah. Oh, sorry. Salah Hadari? Sorry if I mispronounced that. Let's see. You retracted your message, but you're welcome to post. And then Galazar's back. Welcome, welcome. We're going to be diving into like another portfolio, but let's have a quick chat here. So if you have any questions in the meantime, if you want to break anything down, if you want to break anything down that I just said, feel free to ask any questions and we can talk about it. Yuan Show is saying thanks for the feedback and thank you for posting it again, Yuan Show. Like, again, awesome work. I know that like 95% of it was focused on feedback, right? But I think you're doing amazing. Keep up the great work and keep pushing yourself. I'm curious to see what you're going to be doing next. I'll be keeping an eye on it. I am awake. Hello. hello, hello. Tadine is asking a question, talking about questions. So the game I'm working on is about to be released and I've worked on 10 distinct locations on one of the maps. And I was wondering, once the game is out, should I do 10 ArtStation posts? It depends on the complexity of the work that you've done in those posts. I actually have a very similar thing that I can bring up with my work. So let me bring that up. So if we go to my, oh my God, I can't even spell my own name. What's happening? So if we go to my own, work, right? And I'm gonna highlight the stuff for Far Cry, right? So on one of the maps here, so this is like a giant 1 by 1 kilometer map. I worked on the entire map, going from like sculpting the initial terrain to setting up like the doing an initial painting of like the biomes, doing a lot of iteration on all the different locations. I was also the person who was setting up the benchmark for the scene, right? Which means that I was setting up like, this is our quality that we want to hit, and this is sort of like the assets that we're going to be using. Just to highlight like the variety of work that I've done, the way that I decided to split things up is, instead of talking about like, because to give you context, I'm trying to think, how many locations do we have again? 3, 6. I think every map, if I remember correctly, I might be wrong, every map had 9 locations. I worked on all of them. And then I did the open world in between and a bunch of set dressing there, right? So, but I don't have like 10 different posts for that map. the way that I split it up for my stuff is I have the key locations because they were like bigger locations that I was working on. This is the start of the map. This is the end of the map, right? So those are key locations. They're both like really big locations with like a lot of complex setup. Then I did the locations in between, which I tried to reflect with like points of interest because that's what we call them. And these are smaller locations, and I've highlighted like a bunch of stuff that I've worked on there, right? These are like just like different locations from all over the map. I think I highlighted like most of the stuff that I've done to like a certain degree, right? So what I've done is I basically cherry picked the things that I liked. And then I have another post from the open world, which is basically just like all the generic set dressing in between, right? That's the way that I decided to approach it. That's the way that I personally love to curate my portfolio, because you can have like literally one post for literally every single thing that you've done. It might look impressive if you're looking at like a wall of stuff, but that's not the way that I want to curate my portfolio. So yeah, I hope that gives you like at least an idea of what you can do. Because again, like it's, for me, the thing that's always important is quality over quantity, right? And you can kind of see that here reflected as well. Key locations, points of interest, and open world, right? So the key locations are like very elaborate, like very interesting, like locations with like a ton of work going into them. And then we have like the quote unquote simpler locations, which are like the stuff in between. And then you have like the open world, which is just like, yeah, basic terrain sculpt. Well, I call it basic terrain sculpting, but like in comparison to the key locations, these are like less intricate works. So yeah, hopefully that gives you some ideas. But what it basically comes down to is you get to choose what you want to do, right? So hopefully that was helpful. Pewdie is asking an odd question. Do most other juniors have one similar or crucial mistake in their artwork? I mean, if you've been here a couple of times in portfolio reviews, I think a lot of the stuff is still going to be the same, right? We talk a lot about breakdowns not being breakdowns. There's a... Let me see. Let me try to highlight some of the big issues that I'm seeing, right? The big issues is probably quantity over quality, right? Like not optimizing your portfolio and knowing when to cut out stuff. That is something that we see a lot. People being misaligned between their work and what they call themselves, right? So you can call yourself like a 3D artist, but if all you're doing is like character art, you're not a 3D artist, you're a character artist, right? So we see that a decent amount of time. Then when it comes to, I mean, to be fair, like the study you see on portfolio reviews is actually pretty high quality across the board, right? So I think people in this community that take part, they are already pretty serious about like going into the industry as an environment artist, which means that the quality bar that we have is higher than what you would normally see out there, right? So that is something to take into account as well. But yeah, so optimizing your portfolio, a mismatch between who you are and what your work is. Number 3 would be, what would number 3 be? I mean, we can talk about like the fundamentals, right? Like not knowing how to present your stuff with like the correct use of like composition and lighting, all that kind of stuff. But that is like one big bucket, and that's probably the biggest one, right? But yeah, one similar and crucial mistake in their artwork. Well, if there's one big mistake, one similar and crucial mistake, it's mostly mostly has to do with, okay, if I can only pick one, right? It's missing a good focal point. That is the biggest one, honestly. Because some people make pretty work, but it's just like, I don't know where to look and I don't know what the story is you're trying to tell me. And both of those things come from like a focal point, right? So yeah, that would be the one thing. Hello, Leia. Good to see you. And Tadine is following up with the discussion that we just had. So you've made 2 posts per map. No, 3. So yeah, to recap, one for the generic open world stuff, one for the locations within that open world, and then one for the important locations, like the start and the end of a mission. That's the way that I broke it up. Alex is asking, how important is polycount and retopology with baked normals in terms of optimization in portfolio these days? Does it not matter that much anymore with nanite and engines handling polys better? No, it's still important. It is still important because a lot of how you handle topology and how you bake or knowing how to bake has a lot of ramifications on the other workflows that you might use. So for example, you can start out with baking an individual asset. And from knowing how to bake an individual asset, I now also know how it is to bake a trim sheet, right? Or how to, if I know how to optimize an individual asset, I can now also make better LODs for a video game, right? And sure, I'm going to be very, very careful here. Some of that stuff might be alleviated by using nanite, but nanite is still somewhat dependent on you giving it good inputs so that it can function properly. Because just throwing stuff in and then expecting nanite to handle it all is not going to work. Make Leia is saying it will make it dependent on the procedure of the studio. I would say it's good to learn a nanite optimized workflow. I would honestly say that it's good to not even think about nanite at this point yet, because it is so much easier to go from like a standard high to low poly and then throw it into nanite and like optimize it, or like, I don't know, do it that way. Then do it the opposite way around, where you just chuck nanite stuff in and then it's like, oh shit, how do we optimize this, right? So yeah, I think that's still, I would start with the old school technique, because here's another thing, right? Sure, we're seeing a shift to, well, according to the GDC report of the state of the industry, we are seeing a shift towards Unreal, right? There's a couple of caveats there. That doesn't mean that those studios that are going to be using Unreal are using nanite. A lot of companies there are still using old school methods, right? We also have to be careful with that data that we get from GDC to a certain degree, because that's heavily skewed towards like American companies, right? And all of the companies that I've worked in, we have our own internal engines, and they have their own really cool techniques and workflows, right? And they have their own way of optimizing things. But you cannot solely rely on nanite, which is unique to Unreal Engine. Whereas if you're doing high to low poly, that is going to be applied across the board. Nanite is only something that Unreal has, right? And a lot of AAA companies out there are still using in-house engines. This is all in a very long way of saying that if you craft your art and if you decide which workflow to use, you have to think about where that makes you applicable in the industry. I know that Northlight is having its own nanite-like setup. There's a lot of companies out there that have like their own God, what was the scientific term for it again? I can't remember. like micro polygon setup or something like that. I don't know. There's like a specific term for it. But like Ubisoft has the same thing too, because they were showing it off in like Assassin's Creed Shadows. They have like their own sort of like nanite setup too. Alex is saying, okay, thanks. So in that case, maybe have two separate pieces, one for traditional optimization and one with nanite foliage plus meshes. No, I mean, it feels like a waste of time. I wouldn't make an artwork with a specific workflow in mind for nanite, I would say. So in your case, I think for example, having a small project where you experiment with nanite foliage would be cool, and do like a very small project around that, right? That could be fun. But don't make it like your environment piece where you show off like all the cool things that you can do and then have it all be nanite, because that wouldn't be the best amount of time investment. Tadine is saying nanite is tricky if you don't know how to work with it and can be counterproductive and even reduce performance. Yeah, I mean, look, if you don't know what you're doing with anything in games, right? It reduces performance. That's why in these reviews that I'm doing, I am hammering so much on like, what is the poly count? What does the UV layout look like? What do the textures look like? All that kind of stuff, because it's all required in terms of how do we squeeze the most amount of performance out of every individual component for a game, right? I'm a first-year student, so I don't have portfolio pieces yet. Just wonder what to focus on. If you're a first-year student, just focus on making a single asset and making it as good as you can. And then build your way up. If you want to know like a quick sort of template. A template is always a scary word that you can follow. Is start with a single asset, then introduce little elements to the scene that make it feel like a corner of a room, right? So do an asset first, then do a corner of a scene, then build up to a room, and then build an environment. Hold on, give me a second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Nacho was going ballistic because we had some people making noise. Let's see, where were we? So Udaya was asking an odd question, but I wanted to get some perspective. I recently attended my first interview for a game environment artist role, and I'm transitioning from linear rendering background. During the interview, I was asked, do you model stuff? And I found the question a bit surprising and unclear in context. I'm curious about this question. I mean, I think that question was honestly like, do you just like put stuff in? Well, I think that question is just more about like, do you just put stuff together and then just press render, or do you actually build stuff from scratch yourself, right? Because that is the thing that we do in games, where sometimes it might be seen by people outside of games that you don't even model stuff. You just take pre-existing assets and you just bash them together to like do scene composition and stuff, right? That's probably where that comes from. Beauty is asking about naming conventions. Why do we need to type SM something? I mean, you can see that in the static mesh in the asset browser. What is the point of this SM? It's just to make it identifiable if you don't have it open in the engine, right? So if you have a file explorer and that's the only thing that you can see, SM underscore, which means immediately static mesh, right? It's just for discoverability, because sure, like you could have like all your fancy filters and all that kind of stuff on in the engine, but if you are a, let's say, a programmer outside of the engine, how do you know if this FBX is used for the static mesh or if it's something else, right? You don't know. So that's probably where it comes from, or where it might be helpful. Plus, also even for like other people, right? If you just have to go to like a bunch of meshes and one is called SM, you know that it's going to be static. Which means that you can then use it in a scene without any sort of consequences on the performance, right? With that, I mean that let's say you have an animated mesh, which you didn't know was animated, you are now dragging in like a whole bunch of logic, which you don't need for set dressing as an environment artist, right? So that makes it a bit more optimized. Leah is asking, what do you then say about the shift from texture creation to sculpting as an important skill set to learn? I have some folks that talk about the importance of learning ZBrush because of the current gen and next gen benchmarks. That's an interesting one. I mean, a shift from texture creation. So what they're really talking about is that, sure, right now with like Nanite, we are gonna rely less on textures, right? Because we are, in a certain way, we're trying to get rid of our normal map so that we can replace them by actual geometry, right? Again, I think in a lot of cases you still need both, but let's say for the sake of argument that is going to be the thing. That means that, sure, you can rely on ZBrush more heavily than having to do like everything in texture, for sure. But there are also other ways, right? With, let's say if you don't know how to create a texture and you need to then create something using like a tileable texture that then gets converted into like a height map that you can then do this displacement. You mean texture creation designer? No, I think painter, right? So to give some context, what we're currently trying to do with Nanite is that we are trying to rely a bit less on unique textures and more on actual geometry, right? So what that means is that in the sense of you have your, what could be a good thing, like let's say you make a trim, right? Let's say you make a trim with like a bunch of ornamental details. Right now, an old school trim sheet is probably not it's not really what is going to be used anymore, right? Because now we're relying more on actual geometry. So that means that the way that I would probably build it up is I would potentially try to get like a height map out of it really quickly and then just do a displacement, and then do sculpting on top of it, potentially, if I need a sculpting path. But yeah, I don't know. Do you then need to switch to like ZBrush to get more into sculpting? I don't know. Because that is just the workflow that gets you there, right? But you can also just still do that by doing other ways too. So I'm not too sure. Well, Charlie, we haven't even talked about like, stylized. Because honestly, like most of the nanite stuff is going to be more catered towards realistic, right? Just because the density required for like realistic AAA stuff is more leaning towards that. Where stylized is probably going to be more traditional workflows for the most part. But I don't really see a shift happening. Because there's other ways to create that detail without having to do sculpting, But yeah. So I wouldn't say if we're trying to say that like, oh, everyone's shifting away from texture creation, it's all going to be ZBrush. That is not what's happening. But I think it might be a bit more relevant in the future, sure. Yeah. But yeah. I wouldn't immediately try to like shift up my workflow for this. I was basically already, because the context that I have is that I don't really care. Okay. Let me try to explain this, right? Because I'm struggling a little bit. Because I have this very specific view that in the way to support our vision of building more intricate, more bigger worlds, right? Doing a shift from texture creation by hand to then doing sculpting by hand is not going to work. Right? Yeah, so I think I agree with what you're saying, Leia, is that if you work at a specific studio that is really good at making like linear games that are already doing sculpting, that is probably going to strengthen what they're doing, right? Because now they don't need to be worried about like crunching those sculpts down to like a lower degree. They can keep more geometry and probably not even use like normal maps for a lot of it. But yeah, I think if we're talking about, because that's the thing, I'm from an open world background, right? The future is doing less unique stuff, less time-intensive unique stuff, apart from where it matters, right? So that means that for the most part, I would, if I was an artist and I would be using like a nanite workflow, I would try to get as much out of titables and like trim sheets, and then using displacement to kind of get detailed geometry from that, right? Compared to then going into and sculpting things. Because if I have like a bunch of titables and trim sheets that I can then use a height map and displace and create geometry on the fly and then maybe do a cleanup and all that kind of stuff, that gives me a lot of flexibility that is good for a world. If I do like an individual sculpt, unless you're sculpting a titable or a trim sheet, that is just going to be used one time, right? So yeah, I hope that makes sense. But yeah, this is the thing, right? Like Slate is saying as well, like there's still a way where you can combine both, right? Let's say you make like a really basic sculpt to get some like the basic shapes, and then you add additional detail, but then layering on top of like your procedural stuff on top of it, right? No. I think in retrospective, those studios are AAA and are ahead in terms of tech. It doesn't mean that the rest of the industry is interested in achieving the same workflows. Well, no, like that's the thing, right? Like you should never adopt a workflow because you think that is what you need to do in trying to get to where another studio is, right? That is usually not what a workflow is for. A workflow is there to support the ambitions of the current game that you're building with your team, regardless of what other studios are doing or regardless of what the industry is looking like, right? So that's why you can go from like one studio that's making an open world game to another studio that's making an open world game, and their workflows are completely different. I think it's super interesting to see how each department can make themselves future-proof. Oh god, there is no future-proof. I can tell you that right now. Because Nanite is like the new hot thing now. Nanite will not be the new hot thing in 5 years. And this sort of argument, or this sort of discussion, right, is the reason why we see a lot of studios that have traditionally built their own in-house tech move to Unreal. Because they, and I think Halo Studios, or like 343 Industries, what it was called before, actually had the best way of vocalizing this. They said that they, for a game to be made, for like a Halo to be made, then they needed to be a tech studio and a game studio at the same time. And now, because they don't need to be doing the tech anymore, or at least like way less than before, they can now focus on being a game studio, right? And I think that is where this whole industry, yeah, that's where this whole industry kind of, there's just never a way to future-proof yourself. Yeah. Do other engines even have their own corresponding thing to Nanite? Yes, they do. Because I think the idea of Nanite came from a white paper from like 2009 or something like that. I think. So it's not that the idea is new. I think we just never really had like the hardware capability to then implement it in a game engine, right? Lots of studios using Unreal and then fork it or heavily modify it to bend it to their needs. Yeah. And I think a good example of that is God, what is their? They have like a horrible name for their studio, but like the new studio for Jeff Kaplan, Kinsunigama or something like that. God, I can't remember the name. They're making Legends of California, and they use Unreal Engine, but they basically threw out the components that they didn't need. So they have like their own physics engine, they have their own lighting engine, and they have like another thing that they built from scratch as well. Just because they were like, hey, look, we like a lot of stuff that Unreal Engine is doing, but this is not what we need for our game, so we're just gonna throw it out and we're gonna make it ourselves, you know. And besides just saying, I haven't really bothered with nanites, as I feel knowing your fundamentals is still word cold. Yep. Nanite is just a workflow, right? Nanite in essence is just like a souped up version of like LODs that we don't have to hand author every asset for. It is just based on like it is, yeah. I mean, to really simplify it, right? It's an automated LOD and culling system that is based on your screen rather than on you putting all the inputs in place, right? Really, really simplifying it, but that's what it comes down to. Arcano is asking some tips on storytelling. I would say, if you want to get better at storytelling, yeah, that's a good one. How can you actually get better at storytelling, right? Like, what are some exercises that you can do? Because I would say read books. And this is going to sound like very, very counterproductive, right? But read books. Play something like D&D. Go out into the world and try to think about, like, try to notice like random things that you see on the street and think about like what the sequence of events was that led to that point. or do like a bunch of exercises. Where's this book? There's a book that I bought. Let me try to say and do some writing. Yep. So I got this book. I still have to go through it myself. But this is basically a book that's made for like a game master, right? Like a D&D game master. It's called Worlds at a Glance, Towns and Villages, the fastest tool to describe towns, shops, and NPCs. And it basically breaks down like how to build your own town. And it gives you like a bunch of suggestions of what to do within that town, right? So a tool like this, I know it is very like DM like or GM heavy, right? It's basically just saying like a jewelry shop. As you arrive in a fancy part of town, you enter, and then it gives you like a bunch of story options. And then it just basically like, oh, so let me read like one line, right? So as you arrive in a fancy part of town, you enter, and this is where selection happens. So a shop with a brass door knocker shaped like a gem. Then you see diamond rings, sapphire earrings, and emerald necklaces in glass cases. And then another choice, a jeweler can be seen polishing a delicate necklace at the counter when suddenly the doorbell rings, the goldsmith turns to you with a warm smile and ready to help. It's just an example, right? But like these dungeon, like these D&D books, they're actually like pretty helpful to come up with like stories for stuff yourself. Or at least kickstart some of your ideation. But I would always say like try to roleplay, right? Try to roleplay. Like imagine yourself in a world. And you do this when you play games already, right? You probably do it subconsciously and it comes with ease, but try to be conscious about it the next time, right? So if you play like a big RPG, what is the sort of fantasy that they're trying to set up? And if you go through the world, what are the encounters like and how do they reinforce that fantasy, right? I have world building settings I do for fun, for no specific purpose. It's very fun. Yeah, and that stuff can help a lot, right? A lot of stuff. And interestingly enough, we talk about storytelling, right? Which is inherently like a very creative thing to do. The way that I tend to approach my storytelling is I come up with an idea for like a scene, and usually in the beginning there's no story attached to it, right? But then I'm like, okay, let's go for something very generic, right? Let's go for it's a big abandoned warehouse, right? Sounds really boring, right? Because there's nothing happening there. What was it used for? Right? One question. What was it used for? Answer that question, and you already have like a bunch of ideas like in your head of how to fill up that space with like assets, right? Cool. Step one. Who was it used by, right? Who is the person or who's the organization or who was it run by, right? And that immediately screams out like, let's say logos on the walls and all that kind of stuff, right? And that helps you like fill out the story even more, right? And then why were they doing this, right? Why was this company storing this stuff here? Like, why were they doing that? Cool. And then you just keep asking yourself these questions to kind of get to like a deeper understanding of the scene, right? So yeah, I hope that was helpful. But yeah, just ask these questions. Maybe I'll come up with like a set of questions because it always comes down to the same ones, right? Like the 5 whys. Again, I'm not a theoretical person, so I keep forgetting this, but like who, what, where, when, and why, right? Like 5 questions that you can ask. And if you have those questions already answered, you have a solid foundation for your scene already. Shadow Dark is very good for this. Lots of tables to roll on for storytelling. Yeah. To be honest, I don't even play like D&D games, right? Like I don't really do any of that stuff. I don't really play D&D campaigns. What I get a lot of my inspiration from is because I've always been very in tune with like the world that I have going in my head. Like I am always trying to think about like worlds or things that I want to build. So that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. And a lot of that was like in my original sketchbooks, right? Um but yeah. Harry is saying I can chip in here. I actually found music and songs really helps with my storytelling sometimes. I have certain music in my mind for a scene and it helps me with the story for me anyway. Yeah, I think that's also great, right? Try to get like thematic appropriate story that gets you in the mood. Yeah, that can help a lot. Du-du-du-du. Let's see. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess then the goal is to be capable in mutual approaches to asset creation while keeping up with the new workflows. Oh, keeping up with the new workflows has always been a consistent thing in games. So like this is also the reason why I'm such a big advocate of exploring new tools, right? Sure, we're not going to go into like the AI stuff again, right? We don't need to. But in terms of like a tool that came up to the market, it is interesting to just like use it and see what the opportunities there are. Now it's AI. A couple of years ago, well, okay, no, we'll make it more Unreal Engine appropriate, right? So the new foliage tool that they're building inside of Unreal Engine, that is a tool, but it is really interesting to kind of know how it functions, right? You don't need to be an expert in it to then understand like, oh, okay, if I ever want to build a tree, I can do it in that tool, right? Um, anything like that, anything that can just like strengthen your tool belt is going to be really, really, really helpful. Right. We do need to get into like a second portfolio review. So we are going to switch it up for, oh, wait, before I do, I forgot it again. Let me share the link for the previous person. So we had Yuano Chen, who we just had a look at, which was awesome. And the next person is going to be Lucas. I'm going to Mfssner? Sorry if I mispronounced that. I should know because I lived in Germany for fucking 4.5 years. Oh my god. Disgraceful. Hamza, hello. Good to see you. All right, let me switch on over. Let's do another portfolio review. This time from Lucas. Let me switch things up here. So if we scoot that in. Virtual reality student at Think Tank Training Center and currently a freelance 3D environment artist at Skybound 3D. Okay, 2 years of experience as a freelancer. Awesome. Let me put on something different here as well. So let's have a look. So 2 years of experience as a freelancer. Interesting. I had a look at your portfolio, God, a while ago for the team challenges, I think. Can't remember. So there are some thoughts already bubbling in my head. But let's start with the general overview, right? So student at Think Tank Training Center, which is good. We got a 3D environment artist with 2 years of industry experience as a freelancer. And then I'm immediately curious what that means as a freelancer, what you worked on, but we'll have a look. Yeah, a GitHub. Oh, one contribution on August the 9th. Right. Let's see. You're on the rookies as well. Cool. So I first realized that I wanted to work in 3D. Interesting. So I wonder, yeah. This is actually like quite a nice introduction to yourself. This is actually like a good example of what could be potentially nice to put in here, right? You could say like 3D environment artist with 2 years experience as a freelancer, and then right underneath it is a like Ever since I was 14, I wanted to work in 3D, and I loved how the atmosphere of a game environment kind of gave me the feel of magic and mystery, which is cool, right? Something like that could be nice. And then you have your LinkedIn, your itch.io. All right. Oh, close it down. Oh, I guess we don't need it anymore. Right, so this is from a student project, I'm guessing, right? So final university project, and then you have like these ones as well. So what did you do on this? Because honestly, like these things, just add them on your portfolio, you know? Because they are not, right? Yeah. I would honestly say like, put it in the thumbnail and just say student game project or like university game project or something like that, right? And then just have like those games on here because that stuff is pretty cool, you know? Because now it kind of feels hidden. Maybe that's by design, but I think you can put them to the forefront. Because even if they're not like 3D art like related, this stuff is pretty cool to see, you know? Right. Okay, let's go to the About page. Smoke Stab. 3D generalist. And then, yeah, 2 years as a freelancer. Now, here's the thing. Skybound 3D. So you're doing work for Skybound 3D, which is I'm guessing this game. So let's see. So the reason why I'm on this page is because I'm curious to see if it was already released or not. Because if you are telling me freelance, I don't know if you're allowed to post it, but I would post some stuff on your portfolio already to make sure that's like, hey, I'm a freelancer and this is some of the cool stuff that's already released that I can show, right? And I'm guessing that like this is already released. So yeah, I mean, I can play it right now. So I would say put it on your portfolio, right? Showcase it off. Showcase some of the work that you've done on it. Because again, that can only strengthen your position, right? Showcasing that you've actually have professional experience and you worked within a team and you're doing professional work. Do it. Put it on here. Okay, cool. We got a blog here as well. Oh no, we don't. Never mind. I was lying. A CV could be helpful. I guess that's a broken link. So that would need to be fixed. And where is this thing going? That is also a broken link. So those two links are broken. So make sure to fix that up. Let's see. What's your contact information here? Right. Okay, so I would love to have like a place where I can grab your CV, right? Know what you're doing in like a concise manner. Again, having a CV in like paper format or PDF format is really helpful because I can download it and then store it on like, I don't know, a folder that I call like potential hires. And if you don't have that, then it becomes like really tricky to keep track of it, right? You kind of want to remain flexible for even if someone, I don't know, doesn't have like internet all the time or they're a busy CEO and they're on the road all the time, you don't know. Kind of want to give the option. Let's have a look. So maybe let me just already tag some stuff here, right? So So we have a missing CV. Some broken links on about page. But yeah, I think overall doing pretty good. I would love to see examples from the freelance work, right? I know that might sometimes be tricky, but in this case, it seems like it's released, so you might already get it. Let's go through the work. We're going to start out with the old stuff. Okay. So in terms of materials, this is super flat and pretty lackluster, right? In terms of like the way that this reads. I was expecting more roughness variation, you know, like having the light like hit it at a certain angle, which looks like pretty nice. When it comes to the actual execution of the model itself, we're not going to spend like too much time on this, right? But if you're using mid-poly workflow, I kind of want to see that reflected better. Modeling and texturing. Let me see, because interesting. So you baked this down, did you? What's that? So that's a screen. So let's see. The modeling and texturing took about a day. With iteration and fine-tuning took about like 2.5 days. I chose to bake some for better control and use floaters for the kiosk prints. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so if you're doing something that is Star Citizen inspired, I'm immediately going to assume that it's going to be mid-poly workflow because that's how they build like all their stuff. And if you're not doing it that way, that means that there is a misunderstanding of what you need to do with that workflow, right? So instead of baking everything separately, the way that they work is they basically pull all the individual elements separately. So let's say you have like a metal tileable, or like your metal material is just going to be a tileable on top of this, and then you layer like additional decals on top of it again with a separate material, right? We're not going to go that much deeper into it, but in general, a mismatch of the workflow that needs to be used for something like this. You have a lot of rough edges around like the entire model, which is not that great. Even if you baked it down, those should be gone. And the material response is quite lackluster at this point. Yeah. Let's see. And I think that might even happen on this one as well. So you got your clay render, you got your material ideas, your wireframed clay plus decals. So you got decal machine. One exterior, one interior, one exterior, one glass, one decal, and one info decal. 6 materials that are going to be compressed into an exterior and interior material that access different maps via the channels. Bake the standard ID map to apply 6 different materials on all 6 material channels. Well, okay, so you have a material ID workflow going on here. You did 3 different masks, okay. I am very curious. Okay, this is what missing immediately, because you are laying out like, hey, I'm doing this really cool stuff, but then you are not showing like all the individual materials here, right? So all the different textures are missing, which is the crux of this workflow, right? Because right now I am wondering how you approach the texturing of this. And then you lay this out here, but this doesn't give me enough information. So the interior material applying the maps based on vertex color using a material function that learns based on the vertex color. So this is, so based on vertex color. Yeah. Immediately, I'm not really sure what's happening here. I use Blender for modeling. We're not really getting anything from that. Because if you have 6 materials, one for the interior, one for the exterior, one for the glass, this means that all of it is going to be unique, right? Or at least it's going to be atlas together and just like added onto like a single texture, which is not what you want to do with like a big surface like this, right? We need to have a way to reuse different elements in the scene where, for example, some of the paneling is going to be the same, or maybe, let's say, Star Citizen again, we use the mid-poly workflow to do like a base pass on everything and then layer decals on top of it, right? That is also a valid strategy. But if you're then trying to split up, and what I'm seeing here is actually quite scary, because if you have, if these are all, well, I'm assuming these are going to be RGB packed, right? So you have one exterior, which is a 4K map, one interior, which is a 4K map. The glass is a 4K map. This becomes like a very expensive thing to be building, where normally you would want to build this out of like individual pieces. Again, we're getting way off track here, right? What I'm getting at is that I am not confident that the workflow you're using here is a right workflow that should be used in this situation. Also, the presentation is pretty lackluster, you know? This is just like a tunnel that goes into nowhere. It's just a very basic presentation of it. Even in here, like if we really were to zoom in, again, harsh edges everywhere, right? Try to have them at least beveled or baked down properly where we can have like a nice rounded bevel. That would be nice. Because otherwise, I have to make the assumption that the way that you're currently texturing it is just not really workflow compliant, right? Or the way that you're baking it down, at least. So yeah, I'm expecting more reuse, more smarter reuse between different things as well. For example, this could be built out of like, let's say, three tidables and a trim sheet, right? Let's make it really easy, right? So let's say 3 tidables and a trim sheet. Let's make them all like 1K. And then what I just done is I have reduced your texture footprint. God, I don't know even with what percent, but like to 25% of its original, right? Because if you are using 3 4K maps, that means that if I combine like 4 1K maps into one, I'm getting a 2K map for all my textures, right? For everything. That means I am using 25% of one 4K texture. And you have 3 4K textures at the moment. So even if you were to go up to like 2K for all the individual textures, and you break it up into like a couple of tidables with like a couple of trim sheets, that is going to be way more future-proof in terms of, well, first of all, like performance, and also just reusability for the future, right? Again, these two things, they have, I think, a fundamental misunderstanding of the workflow that needs to be used for the thing that you're building. And the presentation was also like pretty lackluster as well. Cool. High poly, low poly baking. I would love to see, because this was an interesting one. This is the one that I looked at for the theme challenges specifically. But I want to see more of this up close, and to see how you, let's say, pick a complex model and see how you break it down just a little bit, right? But this is an older project. This is a team-based project, so yeah, we're not going to be looking into that too much. It's a cool little scene. I would already say, from just literally like the overview, right? Just from the thumbnail presentation by itself, I have not looked at these projects yet, right? It's just from the thumbnail presentation by itself. This is boring, this is boring, this is boring. Right? If you already, just from the thumbnails again, if you already cut those out, your portfolio looks like way more interesting already. Right? So keep that in mind, because first impressions are really, really key. Let's have a look here. Cool. Editor screenshot. Yeah, something like this is good. Beauty, color, roughness, all that good stuff. What's happening here? Title? What is happening with the rendering here? This is not correct. I have no idea what's happening here. I don't know what will be causing that effect, but I'm assuming that there's something really funky going on in your material setup. Where is that material even? Plush-shaped container. Oh, I guess that is that material? I do not like that. This just honestly looks wrong. Without anything in it, this looks just straight up wrong. So this is the thing, right? Like, if it looks weird, I wouldn't showcase it as like a separate thing. Because in here it works, but if you separate it out, it looks really weird. So I wouldn't do that. So you got your robot IDs. It's good. So you got like an ID mask that is controlling like separate things. Maybe that's what you were trying to say in like a previous example as well, but I'm not sure. Now you can control like all the things individually as well. Which definitely can work, right? And you have like a material layer set up here as well from the looks of it. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I mean, overall, like a really interesting theme, right? A pretty cool concept that you picked, and I think you've gotten like pretty close, right? I think you can be proud on like the translation between the two. It looks really nice. Yeah, just in terms of like breakdown, you know, the breakdown feels really sparse. You just have like these three materials, which can honestly just be like one image, right? And it can do the same job as we're doing here. But yeah, let's see. So I'm expecting more breakdown. So for example, take the most complex thing that you've modeled, use that as a hero prop, and then break it down for us, right? And showcase how you did the UVs and all that kind of stuff. I guess you're doing that here. It is just not that exciting, right? If you're doing something like this, by the way, what could be good is if you separate out like this little robot and just make it like a presentation scene, right? Just strip out all the stuff that is not important, or even just have like a single light so that we're isolating it in the environment and that you can see all the changes that you're doing, right? Yeah. I think overall this is good though, like showcasing like the way that you're laying things out. What might be, again, thinking about like how you translate or explain your thoughts, right? Have a little bit of text, do a little bit of photo, like video editing. Explain to me what's happening at this point, because you are just like randomly dragging sliders. Just take that little bit of an extra step and make sure that we understand what is happening, right? Cool. And then we have a smoke grenade, which was posted 3 months ago. Again, super quick. Have something in the background. Sell it to me, right? Like sell the vision that you have, because this is supposed to be interesting, but it's really not, right? And the same thing here. Like, I love that you've already done the presentation with the box and like the little pouches and stuff. Grab like a background from Megascans, like put a wall there or something like that, slap a Megascan texture on it, make it feel like we're in like a military locker or something like that, right? Sell me on the storytelling, because it makes for better presentation, way more interesting. You can even blur the background like a little bit if you wanted to, but it really adds a lot of stuff. Here again, what I would say is you have these renders. You can honestly have this render all next to each other on a single image rather than 3 images apart, right? This is way more what is interesting, right? So I'll try to break this down again. And we said this was actually a question before. One of the most common things is quantity over quality, right? You have your environment, not your environment, you have your portfolio. And what we tend to do is, oh, I have more posts, which means good, right? That is not true. I would rather see less posts that have been curated specifically for the things that I want to see, rather than more posts, right? Same thing is happening here, right? This individual screenshot, this screenshot, and this screenshot is just showcasing the same thing from 3 angles, put them next to each other. Make it one screenshot. And even if this entire post is like, let's say 1 image, 2 images, 3 images with like all the pouches next to each other as well, and then your breakdown, right? Not a Marmoset preview viewer, because I'm not going to click this and no one else will, right? Make it an image and have this as an optional thing, which is fine, but make it an image, showcase the wireframe, the textures, the poly count, all that kind of stuff. 1 image. That is a banging portfolio art piece, you know? Because what you're doing is you are saying to me that you know what you're doing when it comes to the art, right? Because you're presenting it like really nice. The presentation, the lighting is pretty good. Again, add a background in here to add to it, but I think overall it's really good. But what you're signaling now is you're just adding stuff. I don't really care about like all these individual like rotations of the grenade. I just want to see them in a lineup, right? Make it really clean, easy to digest, then do a breakdown of it. 4 images for this entire art piece is going to be so much better than having like, I don't know, the 7 that we have now, right? And that is what that is signaling to me, is that you know that everyone's time is precious and that you're trying to be respectful of it. So what you're doing is you're trying to cram more information into less images, right? So try to be aware of that. Lily is asking, wait, no one clicks on the Marmoset viewer? No. If I'm being really open about it, I would say that if you are a recruiter and you're reviewing portfolios, I would almost guarantee you that like 98% of them don't click on a Marmoset viewer ever. The reason is I have to review like 50 portfolios. We'll do it live, right? That little thing and now I need to go around and I need to go in here and I need to click on this. This is wasting time. If you can show all of this, you remove the middleman. You just have one individual image that shows me all that I need to know without having me to click. That's the thing. Even that was fast? Yes. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. This is a small asset, so it loaded fast, but I can guarantee you not a lot of people are going to click on this. Leia saying people are lazy. The less clicks the user has to make, the better. Same with YouTube videos. Yeah, and even so, when you have a lot of time on your hands, let's say the average YouTube viewer, right? They're a bit more forgiving. If you are, or let's say you're an average ArtStation browser, right? You'll scroll around. I don't know. You're just like casually browsing around. Sure, you might click on a thing here and there, but I can guarantee you that even when I was looking at positions, when I was looking into people that were applying to the companies that I've done recruitment for, I only clicked on a Marmoset viewer if they were already in the running to be selected and we needed to do some like last minute, like, are we going to go for this person or this person? That's when I would click on a Marmoset viewer. And even then, now thinking about it, even then, like a Marmoset viewer is not going to make too much of a difference. Because I just want to see like this one image, because let's say all this stuff in here, right? Where you showcase like your normals, your albedo, your glossiness, and your topology and all that kind of stuff. Make it one image, have your information all on that image as well. That is perfect. I don't need more. I don't need to have like a fancy thing that I can rotate around, because this is just like freaking wasting money. Well, time and money. Plus, also, like, you can rip your asset now because it's like a 3D viewer online, and someone else can just rip your asset. So yeah, that's also like a downside of it too. All right, final thing here. This is a really good scene. I like this scene. All right. Okay, so here's the thing. I like what is happening here. I like this. Okay. So if I have to be picky, I don't necessarily agree with like the way that things are laid out and like which takes like precedence over which thing, right? But I love this because you know what this is showing me? You're taking your breakdown seriously. You spend a decent amount of time making this look good. And I love that. This looks good. Because here's the thing, right? Like, sure, you hit me over the head, and I would even say, like, if you have, yeah, you're doing it here in the video. If you're doing something like this, which looks really cool, try to be consistent with it in like all your assets, right? Like have your little high score and then your name at the bottom of it. That looks awesome. But these presentations, I'm already excited. I am already excited about this. Because what this is showing to me, again, you take your breakdown seriously now, and you want to present the work in the best possible light, right? Yeah, we're gonna have to be nitpicky, right? Because this sort of like push, or this sort of like interesting stuff that you're doing invites like this sort of like nitpicky critique, right? This is from like a font perspective. If you're doing something that is like very in-depth with text, try to make your text a bit more readable, because this, as like a solid wall of text, is really intimidating to read. So pick a more pleasant font. But again, I really like what you're doing here. Maybe condense what you're trying to do here. Again, I'm gonna throw out a suggestion. Grab all of this, throw it in AI, tell it to condense it to like a short possible thing, and use that text with like maybe a little bit of like adjusting here and there. Use that instead, right? Because what you want here is you want the visuals to take the forefront, and then if people happen to read the text, they will do it. Because again, in terms of people time investment, the chance of anyone reading this text is probably going to be low, right? So if you are, try to make it as visually as possible first, and then do the text afterwards. Yeah, this is awesome, right? Like just these little close-ups, breakdown progress, cool. Right. Okay. One thing that is a shame. I want to see you break down an asset. Like pick the most complicated asset and show me that you can do an asset as well. Because sure, I can sort of see it here, but you're still remaining somewhat like hesitant about showcasing like the actual game art that needs to be made, right? Um, so show me that stuff, because now at this point I know that you have a knack for like building an environment and like making really cool decals, really cool materials. You're doing good stuff with the lighting. The presentation is really good. You're taking extra steps with the actual like design around the presentation, right? But where's the game art, right? The game art, I want to see you, I don't know, take this fan. How did you do the fan? Did you decide to go for full geo? Did you do transparency? Like all that kind of stuff. Show it to us, right? Showcase that you can not only do the big scene, but also the individual stuff about the scene. The way that I want you to think about this is what we are thinking about, like if I put my recruiter hat on, you know, and what we're looking for is we basically have like a bunch of like checkboxes in our head. What those checkboxes might be is like, okay, can this person do like an individual asset? Does this person know how to build an environment efficiently, right? And those are like two big checkboxes, but you can break them down into individual components, right? For example, material creation, like baking. Do they know how to optimize their poly count? Do they know how to use which workflow to use where? Those things you want to, the reason why you showcase a breakdown is because you want to showcase that like, hey, you have all these checkboxes. I'm going to tick a lot of them, you know, and here's why. That's why you're doing it. Yeah. Again, very impressed with taking the presentation itself to the next level. I think that's good, but don't forget about the game art that you want to show off. This might even be a case where if you have something that you're going to be refining in terms of like design language that you want to do for your portfolio presentation, make that consistent throughout your whole portfolio. And that is immediately gonna jump up the quality for like all of it, right? So what I would do, and I guess now that we looked at everything, this is a good moment to give you some suggestions, right? Re-render this prop. Make sure that okay, let me write down suggestions here. So we talked about loads of missing breakdowns, right? Both on environments and assets. I want to see you break down both, right? Because there's still a lot of question marks that I have in my head. Because even this, right? Like base color, ORM, normal, that's good. What is the texture size though? What's the texture size of this? How are they used in the scene, right? Like maybe having a similar breakdown like this, and then showcasing. What would I do? Let me see. Because you could, and this is where my brain is racing now, right? Because this is really interesting to think about now from like a visual perspective. Like, how do we present this stuff? Because you have your titleable number 1, 2, and 3, right? You showcase a material sphere, which is a good start. And you showcase the textures. What if we switch from titleable 1, concrete wall, this is what it looks on a material sphere, and this is how it looks in the scene, right? So we change the material sphere to like an actual shot in the scene. That could be cool, right? And now we're thinking about like, okay, this is what a flat texture looks like, and this is how it's actually implemented into the scene. And you're showcasing sort of like a distilled version, and then also how it's used in the game. And pick like a nice spot that has like nice vertex painting and decals and all that kind of stuff. Showcase that, right, as an example of where this is used. That can be really cool. But yeah, okay, so what I was saying, we were talking about design language, right? Across the board. Oh, this is where I got so excited. So this design language that you're doing on this these examples, for example, how can we implement that in a way that it becomes like your language for your entire portfolio, right? And that means get rid of the stupid like Unreal Engine logo, right? We talked about this. I don't think it's needed. I can definitely see that this is Unreal. There's no shame about it. That's totally fine. But try to make this yours, right? Use that same sort of design language and maybe add it on a thumbnail, you know, where this is called like high score, right? Just have that like as a title card, you know, don't take up too much space. Maybe a bit smaller than the Unreal Engine logo, have it in the middle. This is called like project in small, high score below it. Bam. That immediately becomes like, wow, okay. Even taking the design elements into the presentation, right? And then if you can do that consistently across the board, that would be sweet, right? You could even start experimenting with like different fonts and all that kind of stuff. That's more optional, but you can do some really cool stuff with this, right? So that's all the design language part. Second thing is, yeah, the consistency between like how impressive they look, right? So if you want to, well, that's probably like a different thing that we need to address here. I would get rid of this, get rid of this. This is a showcase for team-based project, which is good, and keep these guys, right? But I would definitely improve. So I'm gonna do like a plus here. Wow, definitely improve this guy. Put a background behind it, make it more visually impressive. That is gonna take you like an hour or two, and it's gonna look like way better. Or maybe let's say a day. Let's say it takes like a day. That's gonna level up your portfolio by and large. Get rid of like the older, boring stuff. And then focus on like the high quality stuff, right? Maybe even add the other game, the games that you worked on, add them in like a separate tab where it's like, these are all the games that I made. They're old, sure, but they showcase, they're not necessarily a showcase of your individual artistic skills. They're a showcase of your team-based skills. Showcasing that you can also do like potentially other styles and different teams and all that kind of stuff too, which is good. It's good. Keep that. But yeah, that's what I would do here. Cool. So let me take some notes and then we'll dive into some points here, right? So improvements. So add breakdowns show me that you can do assets as well. Improve. You wanna use the visual design language that you said for yourself further, right? Like use that. I see that you have like an interesting way to use that, so I'm excited about that already. Try using that to separate yourself from the rest of the competition, right? Let's see, what else do we have? What do I want to see in terms of like portfolio stuff from you in the future? Because I think if we look at this, the individual texture quality is not your strong suit yet, right? So that might be where you want to spend a bit more time. That's not necessarily everyone's forte though. If you want to build scenes, right? What I want to see at this point is how you can take maybe your own small idea and take that to fruition, or take something that is like very rough in concept and then build upon that, right? Because you use high score, which is this environment, right? And then this is what you made of it. Which is, there's some interesting design choices and changes that you've done there. But aside from that, you're still working from a concept, right? What could be cool is you say, hey, I'm gonna take a rougher concept and I'm gonna put my own story into it, so that you can also showcase what it means to like get a rough concept and then build your own story on top of it. That's a good showcase too. Plus, all the while improving your material skills, and your storytelling skills and your set dressing. I think that is definitely going to be the way to go. Because even here, if you look at like the ceiling, right? I'm imagining that there's like a bunch of really interesting details. If you were to look at actual, let's see if I can find one actually. If you could zoom into this guy, right, which I cannot because it's just going to be way too small, you're probably going to see like a bunch of interesting details that can be incorporated in your ceiling to make your ceiling more impressive, right? And it's that sort of like set dressing and storytelling that I kind of want to see. Basically comes down to attention to detail, right? That's the stage where we've come to, where it's like, I want to see more and I want to see, well, more. I have to be careful about the word more. I want to see more attention to detail specifically. That doesn't mean that I want to see bigger scoped scenes, but I want to see the actual, the real attention to detail and like miniature storytelling and all that kind of stuff. Cool. Right, but yeah, great work. So let's talk about hireability. The hireability is probably gonna lose a lot of points. I can see where you're going. This is dragging a bunch of it down, unfortunately. This one is really good. I like where this one is going. This one is interesting. I think the concept is interesting, but I think from like a workflow perspective, I don't know. Yeah, this one is interesting. I feel like this one has way more value to your portfolio than this one. Anyway, we're talking about hireability. So the hireability currently is being dragged down by some missing examples from your freelance work, if that is the case. And then a lot of question marks still surrounded by your breakdowns, right? I think your presentation is really strong. Your artistic skills, interesting. Because I think if we were to look at like an individual basis, the materials, I think your whole scene by itself is done really well due to the lighting and how from a big perspective it comes together. I think from an artistic perspective, there's still a lot of things that I'm lacking. You are doing a good job with your materials compared to the old one. Yeah, definitely made some amazing improvements. So really happy with that. But if you look at the individual things, still a little bit basic, right? Like even this, like how is this vending machine supposed to work? Yeah. And in techniques, God. Techniques is where you really like at the moment, right? Because it's just, I have to assume that you can do stuff, but because you are hesitant to tell me about it. That's what I'm getting. So that's where we're currently landing at the moment. Again, there's a lot of really, really easy, well, relatively easy fixes that we can do to kind of remedy some of the stuff that we talked about today, right? But yeah, really, really cool stuff. I mean, honestly, really good trajectory as well from work, right? It becomes time to let go of like some of the older work, ditch some of these older pieces. They really drag your portfolio down. It would be way stronger if, let's say, I'm only looking at these 3 pieces for your main portfolio with like a cool background. That's going to be way stronger than keep hanging on to these 2, because also if you dive into them, I don't think the workflow makes sense. But we talked about that already. So yeah. Hope that was helpful. I'm going to share your portfolio once more. So go check out their work. Keep following with their progress. And yeah, thank you, Lucas, for sharing your work. That was awesome. Yeah, it is interesting what good design can do. Like if you really take that breakdown that you did on the last piece to like the next level and you apply that consistently to your work, there's a lot of really interesting stuff that can happen with that. To really separate yourself from people out there. Hmm. Right. Yeah, I love that Lily was surprised by like no one clicking on like Marmoset viewer. I mean, it makes sense. It's a good tool. I don't think it's like relevant as like a tool for portfolios in the broad sense, I would say. You always, yeah, like Leia said, you always have to do like the most optimal thing to get like the most amount of information across with the minimal amount of imagery, right? Or like with the minimal amount of quantity. So it's about like really streamlining your information density, I would say, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. Do-do-do-do. Right. Okay. We have time. We have time for a couple more questions, I think, and then I'm probably gonna head on off and start cracking on some workshops. So if you want to ask any questions, if anything came up during that review, and you want to ask me about it, feel free to do so. Lily is saying, I haven't added a Marmoset viewer in a while, but my old school always wanted us to add a Sketchfab viewer to our portfolio. Yeah. Same here. I think Sketchfab viewer was just coming up as I was like presenting my work, right? Yeah. MSR is saying I click on them, but simply because I'm not a recruiter, lol. Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? I don't. That's why I'm saying you should not. Wait, you should not have them, right? But they should always be seen as an additional thing on top of the static image, right? Because if you rely on, let's say, your Marmoset viewer, to only showcase the breakdown, then that's where it goes wrong, right? But if you have a breakdown and then you want to throw in a Marmoset viewer, it's fine, you know? Slate is saying, I feel like it's okay to have them, but they are just not effective, right? Yep, 100%. Yeah, they're just not the most effective way of giving recruiters, which allow for speed to really consume or like intake the information that you want them to have, right? That's why images. That's why images are still king, you know. Images, or like I can make an exception for autoplay, like quick snapping GIFs, you know, like they're quite nice. But if I have to click on something, that's when it goes too far. And the same thing also applies to when, for example, you have a link tree, right? This is something very stupid, right? But if you ask me to go from your ArtStation to your link tree to your LinkedIn, then it's like, well, what are we doing? You know, because you send me to this other guy who's then sending me to this other guy, you know? Well, I can just go to the other guy immediately, you know? It just doesn't make sense at that point. Yeah, you want to really streamline the way that you're doing stuff. Because everything is a funnel, right? And what I mean by that is that if you, I don't know, if you've been online and let's say you've interacted with like LinkedIn, right? The funnel is basically like you see the post, that is the top of the funnel, right? And then if you scroll down, okay, you've already left. You no longer matter, right? But if you click on it, then you go down into the funnel, right? And then it opens up in big, and then maybe there's a link, and then you click on that again, then you go down the funnel, right? What you want to do is you want to reduce the amount of steps in that funnel, because at every point where you ask someone to actually take an action, that's where people drop off just immediately. And the same thing happens with recruiters as well. And if you that is also why ArtStation is so effective, right? Because ArtStation, it opens you up immediately. You see all the work of that person bam, right in front of you, right? That is awesome. Whereas some people's homepage, you land on their page and it's like, hey, I'm a 3D environment artist with like a big banner, which looks good to us, right? But we forget that we just added another step in the whole process for someone to actually go into your work, right? That's why a lot of these like artistic pages or portfolio pages, you just land on the page and you scroll. That's it. No other interaction. And everything is built as like this one page that just scrolls through, right? Galazar is saying, can I rewatch past workshops? For example, like a month ago, there was a workshop that I missed. Yes, we have a backlog of 5 workshops that I still need to edit, and I will do that over this weekend. But if you are a workshop access member, you will get access to them ASAP. I'm hoping to get those over to everyone this weekend. Should be doable. So expect an update on that today or tomorrow. Bajafik is asking, I wanted to ask if I can put my resume, my freelance Upwork experience on my resume. Sometimes the work is from individual clients and sometimes from the studio or a company. Yeah, I mean, so the way that I would potentially do that is you can say professional experience, freelance environment artist / Upwork. And then you could maybe talk about some of your clients if they're known, right? And then talk about like your main things that you've worked on. That would potentially be a good way to do it. Deepot L is asking, I was under the impression that recruiters are mostly HR people and not the actual artists from the studio, or it depends. It depends. I think in general, it will most likely be even a dedicated recruiter, right? Or a person from HR in most cases, especially if you look at bigger companies, right? Keep in mind that my experience usually comes from bigger companies, right? So usually you'll be in touch with a person from HR or a dedicated recruiter. However, when I was involved in recruitment for Ubisoft, we would basically do a lot of scouting ourselves. So there were a lot of times where we didn't even have a position open. We would just, through like other people knowing people, we would just have a bunch of artists that we were interested in. And we would select from them. Which was really interesting because we didn't really have like an official process for that, right? It was just like, hey, we need a person who is good at X, Y, and Z. Does anyone know anything like that? Before we then go to HR and like set up this whole thing. Most of the people that we then hired at that point came from people that we knew. Leia is saying, yep, artists are usually very self-focused, which is good because you have to learn what your niche is. But as soon as you want to work in a team, you have to change your mindset to what do you want? Yeah, that's why we do the team challenges, right? That's why we do team challenges, because we take people from like, I am focused on my work to like, oh my God, I need to focus on everyone's work now. And it's not only my opinion that matters, it's everyone's opinion. And how does that work, right? Which is, I keep talking to the mentors about that. That is the biggest difference, right? Where you're just working on your own thing, on your own time, and just like everything is chill, to then being thrown into like a random group with like 4 other random people from different skill levels, and you just have to make things work. That is a shock for a lot of people. Yeah, I hope that answered the question, Depop, because it definitely varies between companies, but that's been my experience. So yeah, in other companies it was very much out of our hands, right? Yeah, I'm trying to think. So the usual way that it works is that you have recruiters who go to like industry events and they'll put up like postings, and you'll see them like being very active on LinkedIn, right? They basically put up a post saying like, hey, open position, apply here. You have a bunch of people that apply. They do the first selection, right? So the first selection doesn't even get seen by artists in most cases, I would think. And then from that selection, let's say from, I don't know, the selection that remains, they then get put into contact with the first round of interviews with an actual artist or person from the studio, after which point they then get to see their portfolio. So yeah, there's an automatic, again, it's a funnel, right? You have, let's say, I don't know, you have 100 people who apply. From those 100 people, like 30 people get selected. And then from those people, like 15 get like an interview or something like that, you know, as a rough measurement. Is it like frowned upon for the person who is working on Upwork instead of an indie or a proper studio? Is it like a bad thing for a recruiter? Not necessarily. I think, honestly, if that is the thing that you can currently do because you don't have access to an indie studio or a proper studio close to you, or you can't really get hired, right? I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just work, right? And you're doing work in like a related field. The only thing that I would say is that the skill level on Upwork is probably not going to be comparable to the skill level that you would need for an indie or a AAA studio for the most part. So keep that in mind, that you cannot only rely on your Upwork, your Upwork work to get you into the industry. You have to do more. Lydia is saying, yeah, I was also put on a list by a company before and they reached out for an interview. Yeah, usually companies have a lot of internal lists, you know, that even if you get declined for one position now, if they're pretty good and they're really interested in having you on, they might reach out at a certain point later. Leah is saying the team challenge is so good. I'm learning lots about what it means to be a team lead and supporting the team. It's great. Yeah, I'm glad you're having a lot of fun, Leah. That's awesome. And Pewdie is asking a question about the challenge. How do people allocate tasks during a challenge? Like who's doing what, especially during the blockout stage? Well, so during the blockout stage, it's usually very independent, right? Because everyone kind of comes up with their own idea. They make a blockout and then they pitch it to the rest of the team. They say like, hey, look, this is my blockout. I like it because of this, this, and that. And then the rest of the team can be like, but what if we do this with this blockout instead? And we combine like a bunch of ideas, right? That's usually... Well, that's the good case of when it happens when you work a blockout with your team, right? Then usually what happens during a blockout is, okay, we have all these components that are visible in our blockout. What do we then need to do? You break down, I don't know, a modular kit for like castle walls. Oh, we need to have a lot of rocks. Oh, there's a lava material, all that kind of stuff. And then you basically just become, you basically just go through the team and you say like, hey, look, what are you good at? You know, and what do you want to do? That's how it should work. And then sometimes there's always going to be teams where it's like, hey, look, we have no one who does this. You have a choice. Either a person jumps on it and they learn the skill, or you adjust the environment because you don't have a person who does the skill, right? So that's the way that works. Or should work. I think there are definitely arguments to be made that we need to be better at like documenting that part of a process. But here's the issue, right? Because just as with studios, a lot of people will come up with their own kind of ways of working. And if we try to formulate it in a certain way, that means that we expect some sort of like standardization, which is going to introduce friction with the teams. So we basically give them the template and we say like, hey, look, we need a blockout, an asset list, a story, and we need to know who's doing what, right? After week 1. Which is just like, okay, these are the deliverables. How you get there, we don't care, right? To a certain degree, we don't care. We try to keep in mind like all these different perspectives, right? And we try to keep the things, we try to keep communication in the teams like pretty smooth. But in general, that's the way that we think about these things. Yes. Fachafik is saying, thank you. I will soon post my portfolio for review by becoming a member. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your future support. I appreciate it. But yeah, the team challenges are always super interesting. Yeah, I had a conversation with like another mentor this morning, basically talking about like communication, right? That it's with a team challenge, sure, you need to bring like a certain level of skill to the table, right? But that is honestly not even the most important thing in the challenges that we do. It's communication. Because you can put a team together that are like freaking really good at what they do. But if they don't know how to communicate, it just falls apart, you know? How common are Gantt charts for these team projects? Gantt charts? What is a Gantt chart? I don't even know what that is. So a Gantt chart is a bar chart that illustrates a project schedule. Oh my god, we don't do that. Sounds like something from Star Wars. Yeah. No, we don't really do that because the project itself is broken down in 5 weeks already, right? 1 week of pre-production, 4 weeks of production. You have a milestone at the end of each week. So every week is basically a sprint, and then at the final thing, it has to be done, right? So we don't really have to dive into complex like project management for these team projects because of time limit, right? If let's say we were to do, I don't know, let's say for whatever freaking reason, let's say we were to make them like 10, 15, or 20 weeks, we would have to drastically like reorganize the way that we do project management, right? Which is one of the reasons why we have kept them so so small in terms of time scope. Because otherwise we know that people are going to get lost and that people are just going to get burned out as well. Because 5 weeks where you're going at it full time is already, well, full time. I say everyone has different time investments that they can put in, right? But the intensity of those 5 weeks can get pretty intense. And there's also the other thing, right? We've had a common request is that please make the team challenges longer. We've had that like almost every time we do a team challenge from like at least a couple of people. The issue is, I don't know how the saying goes exactly, but God, what was it again? I need to look this up because I say it so much. But time investment will fill until like fits the deadline or something like that, right? So, which basically means that like, oh, not time investment, but like, let's say project scope is probably a better way to say this. Like, if we just add like, let's say we double the time, right? Then the project is going to be more ambitious and people are still going to be freaking stressed to the gills in the last week. Probably even more because the projects are more ambitious. Which is really interesting. My school heavily suggests that we use these for our own project management and keeping the schedule. I mean, so I don't really hate the suggestion of like using the tool per se, right? Because you have a tool, and if it works for you, that's great, right? For me, those tools, they never really worked. Let me think. Because technically the way that you would make a project, right, is you would have like a deadline. And you would say, hey, look, this is my deadline. It's going to be in 2 months. I want to make this project, right? Because that's what I can feasibly do within that deadline. And then you try to do your best to estimate like you basically backtrack from the end goal all the way to the beginning, and then you can maybe split that up into like milestones that you want to hit, right? The issue with that is that is like a very, it doesn't take into account for like issues along the way, new skills that you want to develop, creative inspirations that you encounter along the way, like all that stuff is just, what if like let's say in week 2 I have this amazing idea to add like a new thing to it, which is definitely gonna make my project better, but it is going to require me to do like, I don't know, let's say 2 weeks of extra work, right? Do I then not do it because I set myself this deadline? Yeah. I've only used task tracking during projects, never those time estimates. They just stress me the fuck out. I think in general a deadline is good, right? Deadlines keep us accountable. Well, should keep you accountable if you have some like self accountability, I guess. But so I think a deadline is good because oftentimes what happens if we just let an artist be an artist, we would be working on shit forever. Look at myself. This like medieval environment that I've worked on, like I don't know, for the past 4 years, like it just keeps going because I keep having fun and I just keep pushing the. Well, I don't even have a deadline, which is an issue, right? The thing here is, I don't. Well, this might change actually. I don't really have a deadline. I don't really have to work towards a deadline because I don't have like any financial constraints or restrictions around me doing personal work anymore, right? If you are a junior and you want to land your next role, that is your deadline, right? That's when you want to put strict deadlines in place, because then you can be like, hey, look, I've been at company X for like a year. I want to be at company Y in like the next year. What do I need to do to get to company Y, and how can I build like projects towards that, right? And that's where you use deadlines and you use like the schedules and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I went all overboard, and I even started planning in like my days at a certain point. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. But like, let's say MSR is saying like a general deadline is great. Yeah. If you say like, hey, look, my general deadline is I want to work at project at company Y in like a year. That gives me 4 environments, let's say, or 3 environments, right? Let's say 4. And then you know your rough timeline for every project that you can do. And that means that you can like scope appropriately, right? Because even if, let's say, your first project runs over, then you still have some flexibility in the schedule to say, okay, the first one ran over. The second one is probably going to be smaller or maybe even non-existent. And I'm just going to do something of similar scope for my second project and then do something small with my third project, right? And that's what a project schedule needs, right? Like, we can talk about like, oh, sprints and milestones and all that kind of stuff, but everything needs to have some flexibility built in, because otherwise you're going to shoot yourself in the foot and turn into a robot. I ended up modifying the schedule almost every couple of days. Initial estimates and final schedule were so different every time. Yeah. And I think that's also, yeah, that's why in the work that I do at Beyond Extent, for example, right, which is like way different and it's less creative, in the sense of that it's more dependable, and I know that if I need to get this project done, I know most of the steps to get there, right? With a creative project, there's going to be so many things that I encounter that I have no clue of, right? Well, especially as a junior. But then I'm like way more on point with like, okay, this week I need to know that I need to do X, Y, and Z, and it just turns into a to-do list, right? And that's just basically my entire week. That's why I have this shit, I have that ready on my desk. And like literally I have 2 monitors here. My entire monitor just has like a bunch of like stickers at the bottom of it for like all the stuff that I need to remember. And you can even see like just like fucking stacks of like done stuff as well, It's the same with game jams. I think you get interested in creative results if you have a small time window. Yeah, 100%. Because here's the thing, especially the final week with a team challenge, right? That's honestly the most interesting. So I think the first week and the last week are the most interesting because in the first week you're developing an idea and you're trying to get everyone aligned to one idea, which is really, really cool to see. The last week is cool because it is scrambling, but not in the way that we're creating new stuff. It's like, how can I make more with the stuff that's already there? And honestly, a lot of the time, people are really surprised with like what they can do with the stuff that they already made in the previous 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. 6 weeks for the project, that's it. Yeah, and this also going to depend on how much time you can allocate to a project, right? If you have a full-time job, then you have more time to dedicate to your projects compared to if you do it the opposite way, right? Yeah. The backsmith Yexi. If I'm currently unemployed and job hunting, I want to practice environment art. Would it better to focus on smaller scope or create one large single scene environment? No, always go smaller. 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 The likeliness of smaller scenes coming out in high quality is just way bigger, and it allows you to have flexibility of, let's say, oh, I have this really cool idea. I'm going to do this for like the next, I don't know, let's say 6 weeks, right? I'm going to make it look really good. Cool. By the time that you're at the end of the 6 weeks, that initial honeymoon period is long dead and gone, you know? You might be hating the project that you work on. Maybe you might start loving it again because you went through the valley of suck, you know? Um, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You just want to do smaller scenes, high quality, and showcase what you can do in those, right? That's way better. And if you want to be really smart about this, right? Okay, this is now we're thinking it's big brain time, right? If you want to be smart about this and you want to it's going to have some pitfalls on its own. The valley of suck, McVal. That's the part of the project where you hate what you're doing, everything looks ugly, and yeah, you just don't care about the project anymore. So most of the time you just have to push through it and trust the process. But I was gonna talk about like if you want to turn on big brain mode just for a second, every small project that you do should, or well, no, not should, but could actually have generic props that can be used in the next project. See where I'm going? So even if you do these smaller projects, you're gonna have to build some generic assets, right? Be it textures, materials, or all that kind of stuff. Build those things up and build them properly so that they can be used for the next thing, right? And that allows you, without like any big rework, you can actually build stuff. Build stuff in one asset or like in one scene and then take that to the next scene and then to the next scene, and slowly but surely they become bigger, right? Obviously it depends on thematics and all that kind of stuff, so there's like pitfalls with that too, but especially when it comes to, textures or materials or, I don't know, like let's say post-processing volumes or anything like that, you can get a lot of value out of them. Rocks is a good example. I have my own asset library that I've been building up for like a long time, right? It is a freaking giant mess. But I've been sort of getting more consistent with it. As in, if I'm working on Ivy, I have a Blender file that is full of Ivy. So I can now just go in there. I have everything set up. I have the textures and all that kind of stuff loaded in. And if I want to make new Ivy, I can just reuse that, or even just like do a quick retexture, improve the textures, and then just all the assets that I've made before are still there, are still usable, right? I end up not hating the current project, but more like yearning to work on something new and different, novelty, variety. Yeah. That's also a thing, right? That's why you want to keep things small. Keep things small, because by the time that scratchy feeling comes around, you should already be at like the end stages of your current project, right? Which means that if you look at your artistic journey overall, in the beginning you want to build like the smallest possible thing, like like even a single asset sometimes. Like maybe just make like a tileable material, right? Because in the beginning, what you want to build up is you want to build up your tolerance for um like your grit or your tolerance for like suck, you know? What I mean by that is that in the beginning you don't have like the grit to stick around and just finish a project because you haven't built up that muscle, you know? So in the beginning, doing smaller stuff. Let's say you make a tileable. It's like, oh, I make a tileable this week. It actually looks pretty good. Hey, that was awesome. Okay, next week I'm gonna make another tileable, but I'm gonna make it a little bit more intricate, and I'm gonna do 2 weeks. It's like, oh, okay, I've done 2 weeks. This also works. Cool. But you're building up this muscle of like, okay, if I just start on something, I know that I can see it through now. And you build up a muscle of confidence, you know? And then over time, you know that like, you know, I'm gonna be more ambitious and I'm gonna do like these bigger projects, let's say 2 or 3 months sometimes. You can then be like, you know, I've been here before. I know that I need to go through all this stuff, but I know that I can come out of it like unscathed at the end. Because that is honestly the big thing for me personally, where and I think I've always had that, but I'm pretty good at imagining the end result of something. So I can, even if someone tells me like, "Hey, I want you to do this," and I I have no idea how I need to go there, but I can imagine what the final result looks like. I can kind of figure out how I'm going to get there, you know? And just knowing that for yourself and building that up over time is is unfathomable in terms of like energy that you can throw at anything, you know? Because this applies to anything, right? Like if someone says me like, "Hey, I want you to do like this non-environment art related thing. It's pretty technical." I can just be like, "Okay, what's the supposed end result? I know that I can get there. Yeah, sure, I'll figure it out." Eden is saying, "I tend to try and not look at a lot of work because I end up comparing myself and then letting that get to me." Yeah. Here's the thing, right? Like with those situations, and you have that with comparison, you will have that with like social media, you'll have that with the news, you'll have that with TV shows. At a certain point, your body will let you know that like, "Hey, I don't think this is good." And I think what makes like hmm, I think what makes like more successful, well-rounded people is people that see those triggers earlier than other people and action them accurately. That's difficult, right? It's again one of those things that you build up where it's like, hey, I'm noticing that every time, and this might take a long time before you realize this, right? But I'm just noticing that every time before I go to bed, like I go on ArtStation and I just scroll and I scroll and I scroll and I look around. And then I go to bed and then I think about like all the stuff that I've seen and I don't feel good about it. What is that about? You know? John DeWeer is saying that's some great advice. I just started my portfolio. I have uploaded my first piece. It was just a prop, and I'm attending the game art school at Vertex. Hey, and I'm having so much fun so far. Yeah, that's awesome. Welcome to the artistic journey, John. I'm glad you're starting it. Glad you're having a lot of fun. Eden is saying recently got someone follow me on ArtStation, and I went, damn, I don't feel worthy enough. I need to get on my level. I'm not good enough yet. Well, yeah, but it's. I think there's nothing. Here's the interesting thing, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Follow me with this, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that sort of feeling. It is how you action that feeling that actually will determine your future outcomes, right? Because there are people that feel that and they're like, damn, I don't feel worthy. Like I need to get on this level and I'm not good enough. And you have people that are like, that's it then. Right? Like what do I even do with this? The fuck? And there's also people that, and I counter myself lucky, because this is one thing, I don't know how to cultivate this, right? This is something that's like psychologically, like I have no idea how to cultivate this, apart from making smaller projects, building up that confidence, so that over time you can be more confident in these situations as well. But I always look at that as like, damn, I'm not on their level. I'm not good enough. I'm fucking going for it. And I turn that energy into fuel. That also has a downside where you need to realize that using that as fuel, and this is going to sound weird, but it's going to literally burn you out at a certain point, because you will keep going and keep going and keep going, because there's always going to be someone better out there, right? So at a certain point, you kind of need to let go of that, and you need to turn it from like external comparison to internal comparison. Because what happens sometimes, you know, we might be chasing someone else's dream and we're not listening to our dream. We're just chasing someone else's like vision. And someone, for example, this is very common with like, for example, seniority in the games industry, right? You go from junior and then you make it to mid, like this is awesome. You go to senior, awesome. Like, okay, next step is lead, right? And then art director, cool. For some people, that's the dream. For some other people, that isn't. You know? So yeah. Do you guys have this experience when finishing a project, loving it, and being happy with how it turned out, and then 2 weeks later it looks terrible? You know, there's all the ways it could have been better. Yeah, that's normal. That means that you have actually improved within those 2 weeks, just not while working on things, right? There was this interesting graph. I don't know who shared it, and it's been a while since I've seen it myself. But there's two ways that we can improve. I mean, there's more ways, right? But like in terms of like artistic improvement, there's the skill improvement. And during a project, a skill improvement goes up. But because we are spending so much time on our skill improvement, we tend to forget to take a bigger view. And what happens after a project is that we take a bigger view again, and that's when our eyes improve, right? Because we can get really good at like improving the technical skills, but sometimes we forget to take a step back and then get good at like the artistic skills, right? And I think that is literally what is happening there. That you take a zoomed out view, and then 2 weeks later you can be like, when I was zoomed in and I was tunnel visioned on the project, I didn't see like all this other stuff, but now I can see clearly again, right? Which is a very common thing for us to do, right? And it's going to sound silly. Sometimes when you're working on a project, literally standing up from your desk and looking at it from the back of your room can make a whole lot of difference. Because it's doing the same thing just in the moment, right? You literally take a step away from the work. Yeah, like Frida saying, I always get that feeling once you step back and detach, you can see the problems with your project. Yeah. But here's also the thing, right? With that, I think what is important is to realize that you have done the best in the moment, and that you're happy with the way that it ended up, and that those learnings you can take into the next project, and you don't feel bad about them, right? Because in the moment, that is what you've done, and those are the choices that you've made, and it doesn't really make that much sense to keep over analyzing all the different steps that you could have taken. You can just try to do a little bit better next time, right? Just a little bit. Like the mirror trick in painting and drawing. Yep, that's also a good trip. Like just rotating, like flipping the canvas, or turning it to black and white and all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of tricks for this, right? John, if you want to share your portfolio, like the best way to do it is just like participate in these streams, like become a member, share your portfolio, and then at a certain point we'll get to it. Reversey 6 is saying ArtStation is so good for setting a benchmark and finding references. Gotta not let it get to you because of all the people there are senior already. Yeah. It I mean, it is good. It is good to give you like a benchmark of like, yeah, at a certain point, that's who I aspire to be, right? But that is positive, right? That's a positive. As soon as it turns into like, hey, I'm doing this every day, and every day I feel bad, that's when you need to detach from it. Because I keep saying this, it is still weird to me that ArtStation is a thing that people visit every day. Like, it really is. Because it doesn't feel like something that you should be doing. Because, and here's the thing that I've been thinking about a lot, right? Because if everyone is visiting ArtStation every day and we get bombarded by the same sort of like references and inspirations every day, does that not mean that we are going to make like iterations of the same stuff at a certain point? Because I think some of the more interesting cultural phenomenons, whether games and videos and all that kind of stuff, happened because they were insulated from a lot of the cultural zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it. I rarely visit ArtStation is saying it's like, yeah, me too. And I think that's a good thing, you know? I don't think that's a bad thing. My fuel is works from other people from ArtStation to reach the same level and beyond. Also the passion is driving me. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's good, right? Like if you occasionally dip your toes in and you get that flame like reawakened if you need it, I think that's great, right? But then you're using it purposely, right? Which makes a lot of sense to me. Because there can also be a thing where it's like, hey, I've been so out of touch with people. I don't know what everyone's doing. Let me just dip into the waters, and it's like, oh my god, they're doing all this shit. This is awesome. You know, sometimes that can have a positive effect too. And so I was saying with my current project, I actually had the opposite thing happen after stepping away from a bit. Made me appreciate the hard work and realize it didn't look as bad as I imagined, and gave me the motivation. Yeah, that can definitely also happen. I think you should always be proud of anything that you finish, no matter what you might think of it individually. You should always be proud of the thing that you put out there. Finishing a project, no matter what state it might be in or whatever you want to call it, is always impressive. What are some of the qualifications that principal have in terms of communication skills? I think people become a principal just because of their lack of communication skills, most of the time. Because here's the thing, right? Like if you get to your seniority ladder, and above senior, you have a split between lead and principal, right? Of course, you still need to be like a good communicator to a certain degree, but like there's a baseline, right? I think most principals easily hit the baseline, but as a lead, you need to be better at communication, right? Because that is going to be your job in the future. But you still have the responsibility as a principal to set a standard for the rest of the team, right? Because you are the reason why you get like the principal tag is literally because you are the most knowledgeable artist on the team, right? And you will be setting the benchmark for the rest of the people in the team. I need to be a principal ASAP. One of the first models I made was based on a concept I found on ArtStation. A year later, I saw some senior 3D artists make it a way better model based on the same reference. That was interesting. Yeah. And that's just going to happen, right? I mean, that's totally fine. That is also a reason why I have always been interested in doing genuinely like unique work. As in, I love to do something that comes out of my head, right? Because even if I execute on it like imperfectly, it is still mine, right? Obviously, working from a concept is not a bad thing, right? It is definitely not a bad thing, but I love exercising my creativity in that way, where I potentially care less about like how good the textures and all that kind of stuff looks, because I just want to put like creative visions out there, you know? Or like my interpretation of something. But that might be different for different people, right? Because there are some people who are just like the best asset artists out there. And they make like work that Even if I were to dedicate my time to it, I can never approach like what they can. But that is fine because that's not who I want to be, right? And I am just like a different person. Yes, yes. All right. I will say thank you for all the questions. I had a lovely time chatting and hanging out with you all, but it is time for me to head on out. Yeah, if you know the drill by now. If you're not a member yet, or if you want to convince some of your friends, tell them about Beyond Extent. You know, we will always love to have more members. And if you, this is actually something new that I want to try. If you have an idea and you want to suggest it to myself, or maybe you have some feedback on how to improve things, let me know. You know, my DMs are open on Discord. Send me a DM. We'll love to hear about it. But anyway, go check out the website, all that good stuff. Thanks so much for all the support. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. John the Weird coming in like last minute clutch with like a question about AI, with the main concern that it like didn't really come up with something new. Yeah, that's because it can't. Bye bye.